Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Planning and Zoning Commission meeting for February 15th, 2024. At this time, I'd like to call the meeting to order. The commissioners who are present for this evening's meeting are at City Hall. We also have staff from the city attorney and clerk's offices, as well as city planning department. If you're joining us on Zoom this evening, we can see that you're here. You may observe the meeting, however, your ability to be seen on screen and talk will be muted. During the public testimony portion of the meeting, you will be unmuted and then be able to comment. Please note that we do not take questions until the public testimony portion. If you have a process question during the meeting, please email cityclerk@meridiancity.org. They will reply as quickly as possible. And with that, let's begin with roll call. Madam Clerk?
Thank you, Chairperson Seal. Commissioner Garrett? Commissioner Lorcher?
Present.
Commissioner Smith?
Present.
Commissioner Sandoval?
Present.
Chairperson Seal.
Here. And this evening, we have two new commissioners that are with us for the first time. So Commissioner Sandoval and Commissioner Garrett, welcome. First time on, and for that, the first time on the agenda is the adoption of the agenda. Bladen subdivision, which is file number H 2023-0043, will be open for the purpose of continuing to a regularly scheduled meeting. Be open for that purpose only. So if you're here to testify on that file tonight, we will not be taking public testimony. And with that, can I get a motion to adopt the agenda?
So moved.
Second.
Been moved and seconded to adopt the agenda. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Agenda is adopted. With the consent agenda, we have, oh, my notes are wrong. We have two items on the consent agenda. First is to approve the minutes of the February 1st, 2024 meeting of the Planning and Zoning Commission. Second is findings of facts, conclusions of law for WAFED, file number H 2023-0068. Can I get a motion to accept the consent agenda as presented?
So moved.
Second.
Been moved and seconded to approve the consent agenda. All in favor, please say aye.
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 Opposed, nay. All right. Consent agenda is approved. Okay, with that, we have the election of the 2024 Commission Chair and Vice Chair.
Mr. Chair.
I was gonna say, this is always awkward because there's, we're already in the positions, and I think unless anybody's wants to step up, then we'll probably retain these positions, but we do have to nominate and elect.
Mr. Chair, I nominate Andy Seal, yourself, as continued as chair.
Okay.
Second.
I've been nominated to continue as chair. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Guess I'm locked in for another year, and I will nominate Commissioner Lorcher to continue as vice chair for 2024.
I'll second that.
It's been moved and seconded to continue Commissioner Lorcher as vice chair. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. They got you too.
Do I vote for myself?
You can.
Oh, then I say aye.
Okay.
I approve.
All right. Well, congratulations,
You too.
I think. All right. And with that, I'd like to briefly explain the public hearing process. We will open each item individually and begin with the staff report. Staff will report their findings on how the item adheres to our comprehensive plan and unified development code. After staff has made their presentation, the applicant will come forward to present their case and respond to staff comments. They will have 15 minutes to do so. After the applicant is finished, we will open the floor to public testimony. Each person will be called on only once during the public testimony portion. The clerk will call the names individually of those who have signed up in advance to testify. You will need to state your name and address for the record. You'll have 3 minutes to address the commission. If you've previously sent pictures or a presentation for the meeting, it will be displayed on the screen, and you will be able to run the presentation with assistance from the clerk if needed. If you have established that you are speaking on behalf of a larger group like an HOA, where others from that group will allow you to speak on their behalf, you will have up to 10 minutes. After all those who have signed up in advance have spoken, we will invite any others who may wish to testify. When you're finished, if the commission does not have questions for you, you will return to your seat in chambers or be muted on Zoom and no longer have the ability to speak. And please remember that we generally do not call people back up. After all testimony has been heard, the applicant will be given another 10 minutes to come back and respond. When the applicant is finished responding to questions and concerns, we will close the public hearing. The commissioners will have the opportunity to discuss and hopefully be able to make final decisions or recommendations to city council as needed. So at this time, I would like to open file number H 2023-0043, Bladen subdivision, for a continuance to April 4th, 2021.
Mr. Chair,
Go ahead.
I move that we continue file number H-2023-0043 to the hearing for April 4th.
Second.
Been moved and seconded to continue file number H 2023-0043 for Bladen subdivision to the date of April 4th, 2024. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Application is continued. And with that, I'd like to open the public hearing for file number H 2023-0063 for Kilgore. And we will begin with the staff report.
Good evening, Mr. Chair and Commissioners. The applicant has submitted an application for a rezone. The site consists of 0.34 acres of land currently zoned R4 located at 1105 North Meridian Road. And staff would like to mention, as part of the legal description for the posting for this Planning and Zoning Commission meeting, there was an incorrect error made stating that the property was 0.16 acres, and when to the center of the road line, it's 0.34, which is what is actually being rezoned. So I just wanted to mention that, and that is going to be corrected for the city council meeting.
Okay, thank you.
History on the property is none. The comprehensive flume designation is Old Town. The applicant is requesting to rezone 0.34 acres of land from R4 to OT to operate a personal service for a hair salon on the subject property. A legal description and exhibit map for the rezone area are included. The property is within the city's area of impact boundary. The proposed 1,193 square foot hair salon will be located in the downtown area within the Meridian Urban Renewal District. The building was built in 1948 and is slated for further improvements to meet city code requirements and enhance the customer experience. The rear porch will be expanded to include an ADA ramp, and the applicant will be required to pave the alley adjacent to the property. Additionally, 5 parking stalls are proposed to be paved adjacent to the alley. Hours of operation that are being proposed are Tuesday through Saturday, 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. Due to the size of the development, staff believes ADA should not be required. Dimensional standards, the existing home meets all the dimensional standards. Access is provided via an alleyway to the north from West Washington Street. The public street to the south of this property is West Carlton Avenue, which operates as a one-way only leading eastward towards North Meridian Road. The existing home has unpaved parking off the alleyway with space for up to 5 parking stalls. There is currently no off-street parking on this site. The applicant is required to pave both the alley and the 5 proposed parking stalls within the development of the site upon submittal of the future certificate of zoning compliance application. Wheel restraints should be added to prevent overhang beyond the designated parking stall dimensions in accordance with the UDC. Additionally, ACHD recommends paving the entire width of the alley from the edge of the pavement from Carlton Avenue to the site's northern property line and providing a 20 feet of backup area for any parking. The alley should be signed with no parking signs. Old Town is classified as a traditional neighborhood zoning district, and no off-street parking is required for a lawfully existing structure unless an addition occurs per the UDC. No additions are proposed with this project except for expanding the rear entry area. The applicant is providing the 5 parking stalls off the alley, which meets the required number of off-street parking, as 2 are only required per the UDC for the traditional neighborhood district. A minimum of 1 bicycle parking space is required to be provided. The site plan does not include the bicycle racks. The applicant shall revise the plans and include a bicycle rack and submit a detail of that rack with the CZC submittal. There is an existing 7-foot wide attached sidewalk on North Meridian Road along the existing property frontage. Staff does not recommend any additional changes to the frontage improvements. The applicant is proposing installation of 4-foot wide sidewalk along the southern boundary of the site, extending from the parking stalls to the main entrance. All sidewalks around buildings and serving public streets shall be a minimum of 5 feet in accordance with the UDC. Both ACHD and staff recommend that the applicant construct a 5-foot wide detached sidewalk abutting the site along West Carlton Avenue, connecting to the sidewalk along North Meridian Road. Additionally, staff recommends that the applicant remove the 4-foot sidewalk proposed on the south side of the property boundary and add a 5-foot sidewalk in front of the entire parking area. Staff strongly encourages the applicant to include a parkway along West Carlton Avenue with trees, bushes, lawn, or other vegetative cover in accordance with the UDC. Staff recommends that the applicant connect the proposed sidewalk at the main entrance of the building to the required sidewalk along West Carlton Avenue. This may require the removal of a section of the fencing on the south side of the property. The applicant intends to remove the existing fencing on the west side of the property adjacent to the stalls. As mentioned, a portion of the fencing on the south side of the property should be removed to accommodate the pedestrian walkway to the main entrance of the building. The existing fencing around a small patio in the front yard does not comply with the fencing requirements, as the maximum height for a front yard fence is 3 feet for closed vision fences and 4 feet for open vision fences. No additional fencing is proposed. Staff recommends that the applicant remove the existing fencing surrounding the front yard patio with fencing that would comply with the UDC code, or they just can remove the fencing and not install additional fencing. Conceptual building elevations and perspectives were submitted for the existing structure. The building consists of siding, fascia, asphalt roof shingles, and new wood deck with railing and ADA ramp in the rear. Only new additions to the structure is the rear entry, and the proposed elevations are not approved with this application. However, the applicant will be required to submit a design review application and comply with the Architectural Standards Manual, but full compliance with the ASM standards is not required because it's a limited scope of work for the project. Written testimony is none. Staff does recommend approval for the rezone from R4 to Old Town with the conditions listed in the staff report and the findings. Staff stands for any questions.
Thank you very much. Would the applicant like to come forward? Is the applicant here? Oh, come on. Sorry. Good evening. Just need your name and address for the record, please.
My name is Reed Kilgore. I live in Cuna at 1046 South Red Sand Avenue.
Tell us about your application. Anything that you'd like us to know, or?
Not a lot. She spoke of everything that we're planning to do. This is my wife, Lexi, sitting down over there. Bought this little house in Meridian. We'd like to turn it into a hair salon.
All right.
Not change too much about the building. We think it's cute the way that it is and want to keep it as original as possible.
Okay. Appreciate that. Commissioners, do we have any questions?
Mr. Chair,
Go right ahead.
just to double check, do you have any concerns or any issues with any of staff's recommendations or requirements?
No.
Thank you.
Commissioner Orchard, you have something? No? All right. With that, do we have anybody signed up to testify?
No, just the applicants are on the list.
Okay. Anybody else in chambers? I don't know if anybody else is online. Anybody else in chambers want to testify? Usually I'd have you sit down, but we might make this quick, but nobody in chambers is raising their hand. We have nobody else online. Nothing further to add? All right. With that, I will take a motion to close the public testimony portion for file number H 2023-0063.
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to close the public hearing for file number H 2023-0063. All in favor, please say aye.
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 Opposed, nay. Public hearing is closed. Would like to make the first comments.
Mr. Chair,
Commissioner Larcher, go right ahead.
since the applicant doesn't have any problems with amending the sidewalks in the alley, this serves as a perfect use to change to Old Town on Meridian Road. I'm happy to see that we keep an old house still there and not try to change it too much.
Yeah, and I agree with that. I like the fact that it's going to stay Old Town, kind of that familiar look and feel. So don't have to give up too much to do that there, which is good. So hopefully the fencing can be reutilized somewhere. Oh, that was about the only remark I was going to make on it. I think this is a good fit for that area myself. So new commissioners, we have any comments? None? All right. With that, any more comments or a motion?
Mr. Chair,
Commissioner Smith, go ahead.
after considering all staff, applicant, and public testimony, I move to recommend approval to the city council of file number H-2023-0063 as presented in the staff report with no modifications.
Second.
All right, it's been moved and seconded to approve file number H 2023-0063 for Kilgore. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Application's approved. All right, with that, thank you very much. I'd like to open file number H 2023-0045 for Farmstone Crossing subdivision, and we will begin with the staff report. Or should I say we will finally begin with the staff report?
Mr. Chair, Commissioners, the applicant has submitted applications for annexation and preliminary plat for Farmstone Crossing subdivision. The site consists of 33.89 acres of land currently zoned RUT in Ada County, located at 820 Black Cat Road. There's currently no history on the property. The comprehensive plan flume designation is mixed employment. The applicant is requesting annexation of 33.89 acres, again from RU2 to ME zoning. The development abuts mixed-use employment designated to the east and borders I-84 to the south. The development is proposed to have access to a collector street as desired, and medium high-density residential uses are proposed to the north and light industrial to the west. Allowed uses in the ME district consist of offices, medical centers, research and development facilities, and light industrial and ancillary support services. The area is intended to develop with approximately 360 square feet, encompassing various potential uses like office, light industrial operations, flex space, and research and development components, such as distribution and light manufacturing. The inclusion of loading docks on the elevations for the proposed flex buildings implies that all of the intended uses are primarily related to distribution and warehousing, which requires a conditional use permit in the ME zoning district. The proposed preliminary plat consists of 6 building lots and 1 common lot on 27.59 acres of land in the ME zoning district for Farmstone Crossing subdivision. The subdivision is proposed to develop in 2 phases, as shown on the preliminary plat. Staff recommends that the collector street, which will be Vanguard Way, be constructed prior to development commencing on the property. Additionally, the first phase of development should encompass the construction of both the 10-foot detached sidewalks along South Black Cat Road and Vanguard Way, including the entire street buffers. The second phase of development should encompass the completion of the remaining 10-foot pathway along the I-84 interstate. According to the GIS imagery, there is an existing home and other historic outbuildings adjacent to Black Cat Road that will be removed upon development of this subdivision. Staff recommends that the applicant preserve some elements of the historic buildings. The applicant presented their proposed plan for the existing silos to the Historic Preservation Commission on January 25th with the following options. Option 1 involves careful disassembling and storage of the structure with the intention to find an interested agency that may preserve the silo on another site. An agency would need to be identified before disassembly or prior to the commencement of the road. Alternatively, if no interested agency is identified prior to the commencement of the road construction, then option 2 entails utilizing some materials from the silo in the construction of the monument. The meeting conducted with the Historic Preservation Commission expressing preference to recommending to the Planning and Zoning Commission that both existing silos be disassembled and reassembled at yet to be determined future location. It was emphasized that the specifics of the location be clarified prior to disassembly, and the new site would need to be determined within a reasonable period of time. As an alternative proposal, the commission advocates for the creation of a scale replica of the facilities on the current site. The Historic Preservation Commission wishes to review the details of the proposed monument with the initial certificate of zoning compliance submittal for the site. Additionally, the Historic Preservation Commission wishes to retain the ability to provide comments on the final proposed monument presented by the applicant. As part of the first phase of the development, all existing structures that do not conform to the district setbacks must be removed except for those agreed upon for the historic preservation. The proposed preliminary plat appears to comply with the dimensional standards of the district. Access is proposed to be provided from the northern boundary of the site from the extension of Vanguard Way to Black Cat Road to the west. Vanguard Way is designed as a collector street in accordance with the master street map and the transportation system in the 10-mile area plan. A driveway is proposed adjacent to the property to the east for future extension. Vanguard Way should be constructed in accordance with street section C, which is in the 10-mile area plan, which requires 2 11-foot travel lanes, 6-foot bike lanes, 8-foot parkways with street lights at a pedestrian scale, and a minimum of 6-foot wide detached sidewalks. The applicant proposes a modification of the street section to include 10-foot wide detached sidewalks, pathways in lieu of on-street bike lanes, which is required by ACHD as set forth in the master pathways plan. Prior to submitting the final plat, the applicant shall coordinate with the property owner to the north and the east to construct a Vanguard Way and deed the right-of-way to ACHD. The applicant should ensure that the intersection of Vanguard Way and South Black Cat Road aligns with the entrance of the Black Cat Industrial Projects on the west side of South Black Cat Road. The applicant is proposing 2 curb cuts off of Vanguard Way, the planned collector street in the 10-mile area. In accordance with the UDC, multiple accesses off of arterial or collector roadways shall be restricted. The applicant has chosen to eliminate the curb cut aligned with the proposed subdivision to the north and has instead opted for the one closest to the intersection of Black Cat Road. Typically, staff recommends that the curb cuts align directly across roadways. However, staff supports the offset change given that the entrance effectively highlights the features of the proposed plaza, provided it adheres to ACHD's requirements. Additionally, the applicant has proposed establishing a shared access on the east side of the site in collaboration with the property owner to the east intended for the future access. 10-foot multi-use pathways are proposed on the site in accordance with the Pathways Master Plan. One segment follows Vanguard Way across the northern portion of the site. One segment runs along the southern boundary within the street buffer along I-84, and the other segment runs along the west side of the site adjacent to South Black Cat Road to the plaza on the north. The proposed pathway is intended to cross the drive aisle between buildings 1 and 2 that are proposed. Staff recommends removing the loading docks for the rear of buildings 1 and 2 to mitigate potential conflicts between pedestrians using the pathway and delivery trucks accessing that area. All proposed sidewalks and pedestrian walkways look to meet the UDC code requirements within this proposed development. A minimum of 25-foot wide street buffers are required along arterial streets, which would be South Black Cat Road, in commercial districts, and a 20-foot wide street buffer is required on all collector streets, which would be the Vanguard Way. The buffer may be placed in an easement rather than in a common lot, according to the UDC. A minimum of a 50 wide street buffer is required along I-84 landscape per the standards in the UDC, which requires a variety of trees, shrubs, lawn, and other vegetative ground cover. The proposed dimensions appear to meet the requirements of the UDC. However, there is a lack of combination of planters, which would be shrubs and rock mulch with the buffer along Vanguard. The applicant has provided 52 trees and only 34 are required along Vanguard. Staff does recommend the applicant enhance the street buffer by removing some of the trees and incorporating additional planters instead. Landscape buffers along Black Cat Road adjacent to the open drainage swale lacks vegetation in front of the 10-foot pathway, not meeting the UDC requirements. The applicant is proposing a plaza area between buildings 1 and buildings 2, featuring benches, a pergola, landscaping, and potential historical monument of the existing silo on that site. The applicant should revise the landscape plan to reflect landscaping within the buffers along Black Cat Road and the drainage swale in front of the 10-foot pathway in accordance with the UDC. To improve the integration of this property with the neighboring ME zone property to the east, staff encourages the applicant to consider removing the entire landscape buffer along the east side and coordinate alignment of parking with the adjacent property owner. This would facilitate shared access to the east and improve integration with the eastern property. All fencing that is proposed for this site meets UDC code. Off-street vehicle parking is required for the proposed commercial subdivision as set forth in the UDC based on approximately 378,360 square feet of proposed floor space. A minimum of 757 off-street parking spaces are required. A total of 764 off-street parking spaces are proposed, so 7 additional than what's required. Based on the 764 spaces, a minimum of 31 bicycle spaces are required to be provided. None are proposed. Bicycle facilities should comply with the standards in the UDC. Bike racks should be provided as close as possible to each building entrance, totaling 31 spaces or in a designated area within the plaza. Staff is recommending the removal of the loading docks at the rear of buildings 1 and 2, which would create additional parking. Staff recommends that applicant submit revised plans incorporating the aforementioned with the CZC application. The applicant has submitted conceptual building elevations for the proposed flex buildings and light industrial. Building materials consist of horizontal metal hardy board plank siding in white, wood colors, stucco, and dark and light gray colors, metal awnings, gray wrapped cornice molding. The proposed conceptual plans are not approved. Final design must comply with the design standards and the architectural standards manual and the design guidelines in the 10-mile area plan for the commercial designation. A certificate of zoning compliance and design review application is required to be submitted for the approval of the site building design prior to submittal of building permit applications. There are no written testimony for this property or this project, and staff does recommend approval of the annexation and preliminary plat for the conditions of the staff report and the findings. And that concludes staff's presentation, and I stand for any questions.
Thank you very much. Would the applicant like to come forward? Good evening.
Good evening. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners. My name is David Bailey with Bailey Engineering. My office address is 1119 East State Street in Eagle, representing Trilogy Development for this development. Farmstone Crossing. Thanks, Stacy, for a very complete report. And as we all know, we've deferred a few times because we've got some serious history here. We've actually been working on this for about almost 3 years now to get it to this point to deal with the pieces we're looking at. So can I get my presentation? Okay, so the Farmstone Crossing subdivision, and as Stacy said, the project is located north and west of Black Cat Road and I-84. There is an out parcel in the southwest corner there, and that's an ITD storm drainage pond. It'll stay there, so it's not to be developed. It won't be developed in the future. To the north of us is the proposed Avani subdivision, which I think was before the commission here just a week or so ago, or 2 weeks, and is headed for the city council, I would assume. To the east of us is the Vanguard subdivision, and that property is owned by Adler. And they're actually working on the development plans for that and bringing sewer down there now from the north, from Berea. And working on the design plans for the Vanguard Street to our eastern boundary. I'll talk a little bit more about that later. To the west is that the Black Cat is an industrial subdivision that was approved over there. I believe there's one of the hospitals, I think it's St. Al's Sundry Center is going to be there. So it's a pretty significant operation they got. And then they've got a variety of uses to the west here that all fit it within the same zone, although they're not in the 10-mile plan area. They're very, very consistent, and they're well underway on construction. So they are zoned ME to the west. We're proposing a mixed employment zone, same to the east. To the north is a medium-high residential, and to the northwest is that light industrial employment or light, from your future land use map. The zoning we're proposing is ME within the area there, and applies to the 10-mile plan. A lot of discussion on the silo, and actually that's been a lot of the pieces that we've worked on as we've gone along this. So we've been aware, from the time we've made the application and prior to that, that this historic silo is on the site. And let's see, I think we got a good picture of it here to start with. Yep. So there are actually this silo, and then there's a much taller one that's on the site. They were documented by the I think it's by the cities or by the county Historical Preservation Society. It is eligible for registry on the National Register, but is not registered in any area, so it doesn't have an official, historic designation from that case. But we understand the importance of it, and I understand it was as a granary. And I'm not the expert on it, although we've got a lot of experts we've talked to about it. It was a granary that stored the grain in the sides and then provided a feeding area within it. So there's an enclosed building there. Those silos on the side are made from these blocks that were built in the early 1900s that have kind of an S shape at the bottom and top, so they're kind of keystone shaped. And they were stacked and then wrapped with steel rods that hold those things in place together. And they're poured on top of a concrete foundation. I'm an engineer, so I got to talk about the structural, side of things as we go along. So there was a poured concrete foundation underneath this that's there, and they were stacked and put on top of that. But there's the structural is just by them being held together by those bands. And then that's a wooden roof that's built on top of there and a cross, and a wooden building in between. I don't think I have a picture with me, but it does stick out the back side of this a little bit. And I guess I'm assuming this is the front. And again, I'm an engineer, so I do dirt. So I'm not real that great with buildings, but that's my understanding that this is the front and the look of this. So it has some distinct features to it. Apparently, these were somewhat common in the Midwest in the early 1900s, and that some of them were brought over this direction or constructed additionally in this direction. We've met several times on the site with Blaine Johnston, who's here. I'm sure he has some comments for you tonight. And engaged TAG Historical, and that's Barbara Bauer, and she brought in Fred Critchfield, who does artistic renderings of this type of stuff. And then we intended to have them do the documentation of the historical piece here, and from the very beginning, and to create a monument sign of some sort that we had Fred Critchfield work on it, and we'd build. I'll go into a little bit of that further later on, as we show you what we're proposing on here. So and prior to that, we had gone through and looked at the location of it. We tried to move the street around some with this thing and incorporate it into the site on here. And as we've gone along, ACHD approved the project to the left. Vanguard is where it is, and this silo ends up being really dead in the right of way for Vanguard Street. So the location across to the west was approved with the subdivision there. The location of Vanguard to the east is here. We have reached out to the Highway District again and said, could we move that to the north? We've talked to the neighbor, to Conger Development to the north with Avani, and they were somewhat agreeable to moving the stuff. They wanted to talk about it. And in fact, right now, in accordance with the conditions there, that this developer and Conger and the developer to the east do have I think that they call it a letter of intent or a memorandum of MOA of some sort to actually build Vanguard. And the design of Vanguard is underway by not my engineering firm, but I think that Ardura is actually doing the design on that road there. And they're in design work on this, and their intent is to get this built. It needs to be built for Vanguard to continue from the east and to continue out the Black Cat and to provide access to the property on the west side here. And so, it's well underway heading that direction. And so the condition to build Vanguard before we develop our property is certainly consistent with what we want to do. And that's going to get built. Unfortunately, that's right in the middle of the road. And so our take is that it has to come down, right? And it has to be moved, of course. We engaged Pacific Movers back very early in the beginning and asked them, can we move this, right? And they declined to provide us a bid to do that. They said it couldn't be moved without damaging the structure and coming apart. We had a structural engineer evaluate it, and the structural engineer, Sage Engineering, has a letter in the file that says, we could, if it were to remain in the same spot, we could fortify the inside of that silo and probably have it be a safe structure to remain in the same spot. But in order to move it, they thought that it would have to be disassembled in order to move the structure and pour a new foundation for it to move the structure from the site. When we went to the Historical Commission, I don't want to run out of time here because I do want to talk about the project too. We got a recommendation from a member of from Ken Freeze on your Historical Commission to engage Kelly Moving also. They've been out there once, not sure what they could do. They've been out there again for another evaluation to see if they could possibly move it. But when you move a house, you jack up the house and then you pour a foundation and you put it back down on that. This can't be moved that way. They'd have to jack up the entire foundation, and then they'd have to figure out how to put it back down and keep it safe in the meantime, moving it that way. We don't know the exact final answer, but I suspect it can't be moved in that way. So we propose that we take it apart there. We have not proposed, and we're not proposing at any point along the way that we preserve or move the taller silo that's to the east of this. It's not of the same historical significance as the double silo, and it's not practical to move. And so that's not part of our discussion on that. Although I think it was involved partially in the recommendation from your Historical Commission on that piece of it. So our take now is we'd like to take it down and move it if we have somewhere to be identified where it's going to go to. We don't want to destroy anything in the process of that. For our site, we don't think it's really appropriate on our site to rebuild it there on our site. And we would prefer to provide a pretty substantial monument using some of the site materials, using some of the materials there. So we preserve that history. We preserve a board on that and build that piece of it. So I'll kind of jump ahead there. So this is probably round 3, and there's probably 7 rounds of design on this monument before we get there. But the idea is to keep the look of that, some structural size. The monument in the center would be professionally produced. It would have photos of this and the entire history. We documented and monumented for the site. It would be a plaza around it. It would be in our central gathering area there. And the size and the materials and that, we fully expect that we'll go through your Historical Commission and do that at the CZC point, that we'd have that approved by the city before we would build that monument. On the project, the preliminary plat, as Stacy said, I won't jump on that a whole lot more. I'll bring out here that I think there's some confusion. We don't have any loading docks proposed on any of the buildings except for building 6, the distribution and manufacturing potential building. Those things are drawn on, they're actually parking spots with landscaping next to them. So we don't object to any of the conditions, about removing the loading docks. We didn't have those intended there. Those are intended to be flex spaces. They're used by, either a plumbing supply or a contractor. They have offices in the front. They have a warehouse in the back. The little squares that are shown there are just a single overhead door for the back of those. And so they'd be light industrial, supply contractor type spaces. And they work out pretty well in that area. So they look really nice, be all on that. They'd be fairly tall, as you saw in the renderings, and they could have upstairs office space as well associated with that. The central gathering plaza we have here, and we moved this around a couple times, and this here allows us to keep this next to this pathway. This connects the pathway from I-84 all the way along and connects back to Vanguard, and then this path continues to the west. As Stacy stated, we'd like to have that 10-foot multi-use pathway along the south side of that. We're going with what ACHD said for the road section and what they're building to the east. We're fine with whatever road section is appropriate for that. We do have all these turn lanes and everything we have to build at that intersection there as well associated. No problem with that. The access here, we've worked with the neighbor next door, and they have this plan in their design thing there to do the two accesses to the site, and they do meet the offsets of the highway district on that. So we're fine with all the ACHD conditions on this. We're fine with all the city's conditions on of this, everything in there. Understand there's some tweaks to the landscape plan, and we'll bring those in with the final plat, and meet the city's requirements associated with those. So a few changes as we've gone along, but we really think this meets the requirements. And we think that there's a possible solution for the silo, but we really can't get anywhere until we move this thing forward and get around to designing it and seeing what we can really do on that. So we're requesting your approval of it. The pathways I already talked about. And then we showed the renderings of the buildings. We agreed to all the conditions of approval. And we're requesting your approval of this so we can move this forward and get this thing taken care of. Be glad to stand for any questions.
All right. Thank you, David. Commissioners, we have any questions?
Is that close?
Oh, you're well within. You can ramble for a couple of other minutes.
No, I'm good.
No? Okay. Any questions?
Mr. Chair, I have two.
Commissioner Larcher, go ahead.
So in the staff report, there were two very vague comments, and so I just want to kind of get an idea. So the next steps after planning and zoning is obviously to go to city council, but to move the silos would be a commencement of road construction. So if you get approval within the next, 90 days from city council, what's your tentative time plan as far as commencement of road construction for Vanguard? Do you see it in 2024? Are you looking more at 2025?
So this developer wouldn't be able to move forward fast enough to develop that and doesn't have, the use for the build out of this. So the construction of Vanguard is going to happen as a group effort of the Vanguard development, the Avani, and this development here. To move together with those. Like I said, someone else is doing that design. As far as I know, both the city and everybody at 10 Mile and your new vertical BVA joint venture that's going into the east of this and everybody to the west wants this thing built yesterday.
Okay.
Right. So probably this developer is the least anxious to build Vanguard. That said, I think it's probably going to be under construction and open next year. I would say in 2025. That's my guess.
Okay.
Because they want it.
They want it done. And I guess the next question is that the comment of a new site would be determined within a reasonable amount of time. So we're talking about the same thing, right? Because it's in the middle of the road, so the road can't be created until that's done. How do you even reach out to people who are interested in this historical silo?
So if we could identify somebody, again, been with the Historical Commission, and we're not the people who are going to reach out to somebody, but we've agreed that we will, the road group, if we get approved, now you got a condition that makes us disassemble that and
Right.
hold it for somebody for a reasonable amount of time, right? And so when that time is, I don't know how we fix that, but I do know we can catch us right here and get a condition on there that it'll get it disassembled, right, at a minimum, right, before that road gets built. And I'm sure that you could probably also go through, ACHD or whatever, or the Historical Commission and say, even if this developer gets denied, we still want to save that thing, right? And they're still going to build that road. So we're kind of on the side a little bit, except for the idea that if you put a condition on us, now you've got that in place, right, to get that disassembled. When that'll happen, what's a reasonable amount of time? What we've proposed is that this all has to be resolved by the time we get to CZC. Because we're going to propose at CZC that we build this monument in place of what's going there. And it's my impression that regardless of the, I don't get to tell everything that gets done, but I have the ear of some people who do things, right? It's my impression that regardless of whether someone else takes that silo or not, we're still building a monument in our thing that'll include this sign in the center, right? And so I'll probably get in trouble for saying that, but if that's a condition of it, that we build our monument, you know, in there regardless of that, and get that approved at CZC, I wouldn't object to that, right? And that makes it, and we really think it's appropriate. This is an industrial area, right? And so we're not, or, you know, heavy commercial area, we're not seeing a whole lot of foot traffic here. This is not going to be open for people to look at, you know, or see a lot, but we can get in an area here. And if we had a board in there that preserved that history, you know, in a professional manner, you know, I think SHPO's been out there as well to it, you know, but we would have a professional do that documentation and preserve that, you know, on a monument sign there, that I think might do better honor to the silo than just the silo sitting out there, and or if we built the road around it or something, you know, in that case. So.
Well, I guess the truest thing I've ever heard and the saddest thing I've ever heard is that it doesn't matter what was there before, nobody will remember anyway. And so a negotiator for the impact area of Highway 16 said, it doesn't matter what was there, nobody's going to remember. And that's the sad part of our development in Meridian, is that we are taking away what made Meridian to begin with. And I completely understand that this entire area, if Alder's going to be to the east of you, we've got that new transportation, or excuse me, industrial to the west of you, plus the Highway 16. Development needs to come, but being able to kind of hold on to those small little nuggets of history is going to be important for our community. Otherwise, we're just anywhere USA, right? So, you know, I wish you could move it to my farm down the street, but I don't know how to be able to do that. But it's, I'm glad that you have taken the time to be respectful of the silos, regardless of whether they stay or if the monument is made. And, you know, to be able to be aggressive, to be able to get it out in the media for some developer to be able to move it to there so that it can stay within our, at least the Treasure Valley, if not Meridian. So, so thank you for being conscious of that. And hopefully we can kind of, you know, it's a shame that ACHD won't kind of work with you to kind of make a little bit of a curve to be able to keep them there. But hopefully we can take these vague time frames that are within the staff report and find a good candidate for the silos.
I had to jot down a note, so I'm trying to keep up with what I'm supposed to be doing here. I had questions on it too, but the timing of option one, which is basically take it down, move it somewhere else. What kind of a timeline would you like? Because you can't store it forever, obviously. So, I mean, what kind of timing would you guys think is appropriate for that, or?
When we come in with the CZC for the site construction. So at that time, you know, we're going to build the site. We're going to store it on site till then if we take that down. And so at that time, when we go to construct the site, either someone's going to take it or it's going to go away at that point.
Okay.
If we're going to build the monument. Right?
Gotcha.
It would be what we're proposing as and that's a definite time frame. We know that prior to disposing it, we're going to have a solution to document and preserve it in a different form.
Okay.
Mr. Chair, one more.
Go ahead.
Did you talk to the Eggers family at all about the silos? Did they have any comments about it?
I did not personally myself, but and I don't know who has, you know, within this. So they have talked to the you know, the people who did the documentation on it, and it would be part of the discussion for TAG Historical to have that discussion with them to make sure that their history on it is preserved on the sign as well.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, I can get to some of the other stuff later if we've got public comment and things. Commissioners, any other questions? Commissioner Smith, you look like you're ready to ask a question to me.
Mr. Chair, it's more kind of just, I'm mulling it over and I'm kind of a similar opinion. It seems as the rest is I wish the situation were different around this, but again, I echo Commissioner Lorcher's appreciation of trying to respect the history. And I think at the very least, a monument and, working to try to find somewhere for this to go, ideally nearby, would be awesome. But there are realities of how ACHD has kind of set things up here, and how kind of this development is going as a whole that are kind of outside of the applicant's control in a lot of ways. And so, yeah, I don't really have a question there. It's just some thoughts and some pensiveness, if you will.
Okay. Madam Clerk, do we have anybody signed up to testify?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We have Blaine Johnston.
Thank you. Evening, sir. We'll need your name and address for the record, please.
Mr. Chairman, members of the commission, my name is Blaine Johnston. My address is 6138 North DeMille Meridian. I am president of the Meridian Historic Preservation Commission. So I appreciate the opportunity to come to speak before you. I appreciate Commissioner Lorcher's comments on the history of Meridian, and it's slowly disappearing as this development goes on and on. Our goal as a commission is to preserve and protect as much as we can the history of Meridian. And our main goal for this development is, if possible, is to retain those double silos on site. That's the last existing dual silo granary in Ada County. That's why we're intent on, if possible, keeping it there. With that said, with the roadway, I don't know this is possible, but I appreciate the applicant's consideration, his time he put in for it, staff report on the history and what it means to us. I think the only thing I have to say to add, after listening to the applicant's testimony, I don't know if it's possible to have a condition on this, is to get a final answer from that second moving company for approval before it moves to city council, or before city council's approval of it. No, definitely. Can it be moved or not? I think that's the big thing right now. If it can be moved, I think it'd be great to keep it on site. It's less work for everybody else, and it retains part of the historical integrity of that building. So with that, I'm open to any questions.
I've got a question on this. I have about 1 billion ideas floating around in my head because
So have I.
I've, yeah, and to be honest, this is the first time I've been doing this for about 6 years. This is the first time something of historical existence has come through that we're talking about. So there's going
And
to be
I've
a
been
lot
on
of discussion.
HPC for 11 years, and this is the first time we've ever had an applicant come before us, and the first time I've ever come before P&Z to testify. So I hear you.
Yeah, so it's, to me, it's important because we've had a lot of feedback from the residents of Meridian about, losing our history as we progress with building the city out in the future. So, I mean, something in the back of my mind with this is if we can move this, I mean, obviously where it's at, it's going to have to be disassembled and moved. So, and with the applicant saying that they would like to, regardless of if it goes somewhere else or not, they're going to do some kind of historical preservation on site to mark the area, which I think is a good, an important consideration of this, to mark the site and have areas like that available within Meridian. But I mean, would the historical commission be, in the back of my mind, I've always wondered what they're going to do with the northeast corner of 10 Mile in Franklin, something along those lines, or in the middle of a roundabout, one of the big ones, or something along those lines. Like, is that something that, from the historical commission perspective, is that something that would kind of ring true for this piece of
I think
history?
if the roundabout is big enough, I don't see a problem. I think that would be a great use for this structure, is to be in the middle of a roundabout. People would see it. They couldn't stop and look at it, but they could at least say, okay, yeah, that's part of our history. That's the history of Meridians, agriculture and all that. So yes, I think that would be a fantastic use if it's possible.
Okay, just wanted to kind of check on that.
Yeah.
Because like I said, I mean, as speaking about it, I just want to make sure it doesn't take over the whole application, but at the same time, it's something that we're going to talk a lot about, I would imagine. So appreciate you coming in and talking to us. Commissioners, we have any other questions, any comments? No?
Mr. Chair.
Commissioner Larcher, go ahead.
So it would be up to city council's determination whether or not they have a budget to be able to attain it as a city monument, correct?
Correct.
You don't have any funds to be,
No, HPC doesn't have any funds to do anything like that. So it'd be up to city council. If to move it on city property, yeah, it'd be up to the city council to appropriate the funds for it. I have talked to a couple of developers that may be interested, but they don't know yet. So a lot depends on what the outcome of this commission says.
I guess my only other comment is when I first started with this commission for planning and zoning and talking to the mayor, and this is starting my 4th year, so I've been around for a little while. It's been challenging to get Meridian City Council to be interested in our history and to preserve things. It's about growth, it's about smart growth, and I appreciate that. But again, if we lose who we are, then we're just Anytown USA, right? So I don't know if we can put that as a condition in our motion to city council to look at the opportunity to retain it as a city monument somehow. Is that, I'm not sure if we can even do that, but you know, that would be the most important thing to even, so it doesn't leave Meridian.
Correct.
Like it was suggested in one of the reports that it goes someplace else in the Treasure Valley. Well, if it ends up in Harris Ranch or, you know, in Mountain Home or someplace else, it loses its designation or the distinguished part of being part of Meridian.
I agree with you totally.
Yeah. So, okay, that's all I have to say.
Thank you. Anybody else?
Mr. Chair, Commissioner Larcher.
Yes.
So commission can recommend that that to city council that you would like them to preserve it somewhere as a recommendation.
Anybody else? Thank you, sir. Appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Anybody else signed up?
Mr. Chair, no one else has signed up.
Anybody in the audience want to come up and testify on this? No? All right, would the applicant like to come back up?
Thanks, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, and thanks, Blaine, for coming in here and talking about that stuff too. I think you do appreciate, but I want to reiterate that, you know, that we have taken this seriously as we've gone along, and we'd like to see a solution for it too. You know, we're not in that range of trying to get rid of any history in Meridian. But we are stuck with, you know, where we are and with certain constraints on that. You know, basically, we're kind of open to, if you have suggestions that go there, we're trying to set this so you can move us forward here. And I think that's important for a couple reasons. Is one, that then we can plan for what we're going to do. And two, if we don't move forward, then we're out of the decision-making process on it anyways. So with that said, if we would rather move forward tonight with, you know, with your condition than be deferred, because we don't think we're going to find out anything from now for some period of time, right? And like I said earlier, while Kelly Moving is still looking at that, they've been out there twice so far, and I haven't seen a proposal for them, and I have talked to them, and I do know from a structural perspective that this is going to be a really hard thing for someone to take on, to pick up the entire foundation, stabilize that building, move it, and then give us a building permit at the other end. Like city's going to have a tough time, you know, giving us a building permit. Structural engineer is going to have a tough time with that. So I just don't feel it's possible, and while we will continue to investigate, and if they say, yep, we can do it, and we're going to do it for this price, and it can get there, I'll probably try to talk the developer into doing that, right? But once it's up and moving, it could also go to the intersection too, right? You know, or to another site as well. So, you know, we have a lot of options, and we have a backup option here with our proposal that at a minimum really maintains a good historical preservation of the idea of the monument itself. And that's not the real thing, but it's, you know, held to be close to that, you know, with the historical stuff. So I guess I'd take it at that. And then say that we do agree with all the conditions of the approval otherwise, and would like to move forward with the approval of the project.
Okay. Thank you. Any other questions, commissioners? All right. Thank you very much. Appreciate your time tonight. With that, I will take a motion to close the public hearing for file number H 2023-0045 for Farmstone Crossing subdivision.
So moved.
Second.
Been moved and seconded to close the public hearing for file number H 2023-0045. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Public hearing is closed. I'll jump in on this one first, just to talk about the project itself. So I actually I like the layout. I like the kind of the form and function of it. So I'm happy with those pieces of it. I mean, it seems to be appropriate for the area. It's going to help Vanguard extension go in. I did have a question for staff on Vanguard. Do you have any estimation on when that might be complete all the way through to 10 Mile? Just Mile High.
Mr. Chair, members of the commission, I don't, but I can tell you that I've been at all of the meetings where those discussions are occurring. And if what's being planned for that area does occur, it will need to happen sooner rather than later, just because of the access issues out there. So the applicant was correct in stating that it will happen fairly quickly, and met with the applicant or the design firm that is putting that together. It has not been officially submitted to the city or ACHD for review yet, but it is imminent.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I mean, Black Cat is it's kind of sticky to me, so I struggle with its ability to properly provide for the amount of traffic that's going in out there, but I also understand that it's something that ACHD and the city are trying to bump the priority on and get that taken care of. So happy to see some of this stuff go in and be developed. Just on the historical portion of it, as some type of monument is developed for this, my hope is it's something that can kind of be seen from the freeway. I don't know if that's even a possibility, but something that kind of marks that is there, so that, when you're driving by on the freeway, you say, I'm by the, whatever monument it is. It's something that's recognizable. It's something that people can see as they drive in and out. And then as far as the dual silo itself, it's small enough. The hope is that maybe they can move it somewhere that it is something that at least can be viewed. So I don't know if they are going to be able to move it in its current iteration foundation at all, but hopefully move at least enough of it to preserve it in a way that people can visit it. And it's it's a historic marker for Meridian, and its placement is such that it will be enjoyed by hundreds, if not thousands of people a day as they drive by it somewhere. So we do have a lot of places that I think could accommodate that are, little slices that are really, really hard to even conceptualize putting something in there. So hopefully that happens down the road. I mean, I'd love to see, Parks Department, Art Commission, kind of throw collectively some heads together and see what can be done with this. So, I don't know if there's any budget for it or not, but hopefully the city can take a large role in trying to preserve that piece of history. Anybody else? Mr. Smith, go ahead.
Mr. Chair, thank you. Yeah, echo what you're saying. I would also kind of extending that line of thinking of putting heads together. Also considering, if this doesn't get relocated somewhere else, I mean, the worst outcome is that wood or those materials become just scrap. And so if something could at least, be salvaged from that, if we can't relocate the silo as a whole or in significant part, I'd like to see, some discussion of that as well. Yeah, I think at the very least, this, the monument, I appreciate that. But there's probably more we can do. And I don't know that this is that the developer needs to do, but that we as a city can do to try to figure out how to continue the legacy of Meridian in the past as we kind of keep building the Meridian of the future.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair,
Commissioner Orchard, go ahead.
think about if you go down to downtown Boise, and I'm gonna get my streets wrong, but I think it's 5th and Grove or maybe 6th and Grove. There's a water wheel there that kind of shows an open canal of where the water used to come through, and open canals through the city of Boise. And they were able to kind of preserve just a little bit of tidbit with a little park around it that kind of talks about, what was here type of thing. And we see that more obviously in Boise than we do in Meridian. We do have our historic walk down here with our homes, but not necessarily our farms because they're further out. As an advocate of history, I live and own Mr. McDermott's house at Ustick and McDermott. We have fought with ITD because we're in the impact area of Highway 16. We've been able to save that house. It's a 1920s farmhouse. Most people, I think the bean counter said it had no economic value. And that may be true on paper, but it's not necessarily true for our community. And so being able to preserve these silos within the city, if we can actually, what I've been trying to write to possibly suggest to city council is that the city considers retaining it as a historical monument before it's sold or given to another part of our community. And the developer build some toward a monument to acknowledge that that space was there, because there's enough history wonks in our community that will want to remember that. And then, and try to find a likely candidate for if the city is not interested in being able to retain it in our, like you suggested, our park systems or a roundabout or somewhere in our city, that, we can find a developer that can incorporate it. Those are my only comments. But I guess for the development part of it, based on what's happening on the manufacturing side on the west side and your development here was with Adler going onto the east, everything that you're doing for that site is appropriate.
Any other statements, questions, concerns? No? Absolutely. I will.
All right, I'm going to give this a go. As you can see, I'm a little passionate about our history here in Meridian.
That's good.
Okay, after considering all staff, applicant, and public testimony, I move to recommend approval to City Council file number H 2023-0045 as presented in the staff report. I don't know if they're modifications, but I'm going to say including a proposal to the Meridian City Council to retain the dual silos as a historical monument within our city and not to be given or sold to another part of the Treasure Valley, and the developer to build a monument on site to commemorate the dual silos, or the hearing date of February 15th, 2024.
Real
Second.
quick.
Oh.
Kurt, does that sound okay to you? From a legal perspective?
Mr. Chairman, members of the commission, I think it's a bit beyond your purview, but I think, as Stacy mentioned, I think you have the ability to make recommendations to the council. My thinking is you have a concrete application before you and you have criteria in the UDC and the Local Land Use Planning Act, state law. That's your foundation, and really your motions and your recommendations should stem from that. I think but the way Commissioner Lorchard made the motion, I think made it clear that you're recommending approval of the project as presented in the staff report, and you have a supplemental thought that you're recommending to the city council that's related, but a supplemental thought. So I think in that context, that's appropriate, but in fairness, I would say that's a bit beyond the scope of the Planning and Zoning Commission in terms of budget considerations and, council allocation of resources. That's really not really your purview, but I think the way the motion was crafted is sufficient, and I think the council can react as they decide, as they choose to do so.
Okay, thank you.
I stand with my motion then.
Second still stand?
Second, yeah.
All right, thank you very much. With that, it's been moved and seconded to recommend approval of file number H 2023-0045 for Farmstone Crossing subdivision. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Application approved. Thank you very much. Let Sonia get comfortable, but not too comfortable. At this time, we'd like to open file number H 2023-0050, Revel Ridge subdivision, and we will begin with staff report.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the commission. The next applications before you tonight are a request for annexation and zoning and a preliminary plat. This site consists of 59.97 acres of land. It's currently zoned RUT in Ada County, and it's located at 7355 South Eagle Road. The comprehensive plan future land use map designation for this property is low-density residential on the eastern portion of the property. That's approximately 31 acres of land, and medium-density residential on the western portion of the plan, which is approximately 28 acres. The low-density residential designation allows densities of 3 or fewer units per acre, and the medium-density designation allows between 3 and 8 dwelling units per acre. The applicant is proposing to annex 59.97 acres of land with R8 zoning, which consists of 34.69 acres of land, and R15, which consists of 25.28 acres of land, for the development of a residential subdivision. A mix of dwelling types are proposed, consisting of 170 single-family residential detached homes, 14 single-family residential attached homes, and 62 townhome units. The gross density is 4.13 units per acre overall, and then broken down, that's 2.96 units per acre in the low-density residential designated area, and 5.3 units per acre in the medium-density residential designated area. And that is consistent with the underlying future land use map designation. And note, I saw several comments in the written testimony tonight, and I just wanted to clarify that the density is no longer associated with zoning districts in the Unified Development Code. That did change back in 2017. The future land use map designations in the comprehensive plan dictate the density of each residential land use designation, and no changes are proposed to the future land use map with this application. There is an existing home and accessory structures on this site that will be removed with development. A driveway exists from Eagle Road that will be replaced with a public collector street. Discovery Park, a 75-acre city park, exists to the west of this site. ACHD's master street map depicts 2 collector streets across this property, one from the southern boundary, along the southern boundary, and one along the western boundary of the site. Planned transportation improvements in this area. Lake Hazel Road is scheduled to be widened to 5 lanes from Locust Grove to Eagle Road in 2024, and to 5 lanes from Eagle to Cloverdale in 2025. The intersection of Lake Hazel and Eagle Road is scheduled to be widened to 5 lanes on the north leg, 4 lanes on the south, 4 lanes on the east, and 3 lanes on the west leg to be reconstructed in 2024. No improvements are planned to Eagle Road directly abutting this site. A preliminary plat is proposed as shown to subdivide the property consisting of 246 building lots and 38 common lots on 59.77 acres of land. The plat is proposed to develop in 4 phases as shown on the phasing plan on the right. The first phase is located along the southern boundary of the site and includes construction of all collector streets within the site. The second phase is in the northeast portion of the development. Third phase is centrally located and contains the pond and most of the common open space for the development, including the linear open space within the Williams pipeline easement. The fourth phase is the northwest portion of the development. Staff is recommending that the phasing plan is revised to switch phases 2 and 3 so that the open space is provided in an earlier phase for the enjoyment and use of the residents. Access is proposed via South Eagle Road with stub streets to adjacent properties for future extension and interconnectivity. Collector streets are proposed in accord with the master street map, along with local streets, alleys, and a common driveway for internal access. A 25-foot wide street buffer is required along Eagle Road and Arterial Street, and 20-foot wide buffers are required along collector streets, landscaped in accord with UDC standards. There is a large existing pond on the western portion of the site, as shown there on the plan before you, that is proposed to remain as an amenity for the development. The far lateral runs along the northern boundary of the eastern portion of the site within a 55-foot wide easement, 30 feet of which is on this site. The Williams Northwest gas pipeline bisects the site within a 75-foot wide easement. The applicant is requesting a waiver from council to UDC 11-3A-6B3A to allow the far lateral to remain open as linear open space and not be piped. A 6-foot tall wrought iron fence is proposed adjacent to the southern boundary of the easement to preserve public safety. common open space and amenities are proposed in accord with UDC standards. Based on the area of the site, a minimum of 8.97 acres or 15% qualified open space is required. A total of 11.77 acres or 19.69% is proposed as shown on the common open space exhibit, consisting of open grassy areas of at least 5,000 square feet in area, linear open space, a pond with picnic areas, and active and passive open space areas. A minimum of 12 site amenity points is required with at least one from each category. 12 points are proposed, consisting of 3 picnic areas and a fitness course with 6 stations from the quality of life category, a half mile of multi-use pathways from the pedestrian amenities category along the far lateral and along the Williams pipeline easement, and a tot lot from the recreation activity category, and a bike repair station from the multimodal category. A 6-foot wide pedestrian pathway is also proposed as an amenity within the common area around the pond. Staff is recommending a 10-foot wide pathway provided along taps for a connection between the 2 multi-use pathway segments. So real quick here, the far lateral is in this location right here. If you can see my cursor, this is one of the 10-foot wide multi-use pathways along here. The other one is within the Williams pipeline easement that bisects the middle of the site here. And then the staff recommendation is to provide a 10-foot wide multi-use pathway connection in between here. Several conceptual building elevations of 1- and 2-story single-family residential detached, front-loaded and alley-loaded, single-family attached, and townhome dwellings, front-loaded and alley-loaded, were submitted as shown. Building materials consist of a variety of horizontal and vertical siding and stucco with stone and brick veneer accents. Final design of the attached units and townhome units are required to comply with the design standards in the Architectural Standards Manual. Written testimony was received from the applicant, Kelly Black, Bailey Engineering. They are in agreement with the conditions in the staff report, and 15 letters of public testimony in opposition to the development were received and are included in the public record. Some of the reasons for opposition include the following: opinion that the proposed density is too high, the proposed development will greatly overburden already overcrowded schools and area roadways, and will negatively impact property values of existing homes. Staff is recommending approval of the proposal with the requirement of a development agreement per the provisions in the staff report. Staff will stand for any questions.
Thank you, Sonia. The applicant like to come forward.
Mr. Chairman, I'm going to recuse myself from this conversation.
All right, thank you very much.
My primary residence is very close to this.
Okay, thank you very much.
Mr. Chair, give me just a moment here before we start the time.
Absolutely.
The applicant's presentation up. There we go. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sonia, and thank you, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners. My name is David Bailey, with Bailey Engineering. My office address is 1119 East State Street in Eagle, representing Trilogy Development for the Reveille subdivision. And thanks to Sonia for being really complete on all that stuff, and Kelly Black with our office has spent a lot of time working through, any issues we might have had at this, and so I'll show you a presentation here, but we're really pleased to bring you a plan that meets all your codes, meets all your requirements, and exceeds, what we would expect to see within a development of this size as far as the open space and product mix, and we think it's just a really fantastic product to go in that area. So as Sonia said, it's west of Eagle Road and south of Lake Hazel, and the city park is just to the northwest. Actually, our pathway doesn't quite reach it, but it will reach it through, we actually touch at the very northwest corner. And there's a subdivision approved to the north for Brighton. that would actually continue our pathway along the far lateral to connect to the park also. So we expect a lot of great connectivity that go in that area. The future land use map shows this as civic with the park, and medium density residential on our west side, and low density residential on the east portion, as Sonia pointed out. So this low density residential is kind of a enclave of that designation within the flume. So to the east of that is back to the medium density residential, and to the south of that is as well. So that's a piece that splits this in half. So we were constrained by and met with the requirements of making sure that the development within the low density residential met the requirements of that, of the future land use map in that area. The pond in here, this is the previous site of the Bogus Creek Outfitters. And so it's a really nice pond, a really nice landscaping that we're going to retain quite a bit of, and even make better and add more landscaping throughout the site. As Sonia pointed out, the Williams pipeline goes through the center, which is a restriction for us, and we've got extra work to do to cross that. On the other hand, it provides a great central amenity and a great open space, and Williams pipeline does allow us to improve those with landscaping and pathways along them. So it's a really great amenity we can use in there. The zoning we're requesting for the site is, as she said, R8 and R15. And the R8 will be limited by, in that northeast corner, by our preliminary plat. So we're proposing lots that are from R2 in the northeast, and the north and the east on that side are actually meet R2's dimensional standards, R4 transition, and then down into the R8 as we get closer to the west here. So we really think that we've made, some great efforts to meet the future land use map, but also to buffer and provide this really gradual transition of lot sizes from those larger R2 lots that are to the north. So we've matched them exactly on the R2 dimensional standards, at least on the abutting lots up there that were separated by the far lateral. 170 single family detached lots total, 62 townhomes, centrally located, most of them around the pond or access to the park and the pond specifically. 14 duets, which are 2-unit townhomes on there, and total, as she said, of 4.12 units per acre on the project. That shows a little bit where they're laid out and where the single family versus the townhouses and that are set together. We are required on this site, and it shows up on the map, and we're following through with that, to bring the collector street all the way through from the western end of this, connects the park through this area, and then connects us all the way to Eagle Road through this area. So we're building the majority of that. There's another developer who's working on the portion of the south who would build a portion of half of it on the very south end there when they bring in their project on that end. One of the conditions pointed out is that we continue this regional pathway that goes through the Williams pipeline across that little section to the south of our collector street there, which we're happy to do there, and that'll connect into their pathway as well. Amenities for the site. We do have the picnic tables with the shelters, the fitness stations along that pathway there. We really think this is going to be a great walkable community. A tot lot in here and a bike repair station. And then we're in agreement with the requirement to add the multi-use pathway, the wider pathway along the Tap Street that connects the Williams pipeline pathway to the far lateral pathway at the north end. And there's a comment in the staff report, and I think we got it resolved, about extending our pathway along the far lateral. And first thing I'd point out is that there is the easement for the far lateral of 30 feet there. We provide an additional 20 feet outside of that, right? And so that our pathway is in. And there'd be actually a open fence on both sides of that, adjacent to the far lateral easement. And then those lots would have an open fence adjacent to that pathway along there too, to keep that open. Those lots along that area are fairly large too. Those are the R2 size lots. So they're really, really nice lots in that area. Several multi-use pathways, and we talked about the adding on there. I get ahead of myself here. Kelly's going to give me a hard time. Far lateral. And go back there. Can I go back? So on the phasing plan, we had originally planned to work over in this area. This first phase, is a tough one for us as we're building all the collector on the west side and building the collector all the way through the site to connect to Eagle Road. And we need that and we're also bringing the sewer in from the west. So we want to start in on that end. So we were going to get across the Williams lateral there and do some more lots in this phase 2 here. I understand the city's codes, requirement to make sure that our amenities are not backloaded too far within the development. So the developers agreed to the condition to swap phase 2 and 3 within the development here to move those around. Meets the objectives of the comprehensive plan, as Sonia pointed out. We have a variety of housing types in here. Neighborhood connectivity through connected pathways, which we think we do a great job of in this here. Timeline on a build out for this would be in the range of, if we get through the process, we might be building the first phase in 2025. And then we usually do a phase every 1.5 to 2 years, moving through that area there. So we're looking at a 2031 possible build out on this if everything went right, subject to market demand, of course. We provided some elevations for the buildings in here. And we do understand that while the single family homes don't undergo design review, all of the duets and attached housing needs to go through design review with the city as well at the CCC. Or after that. Anyways, they have to go to design review if they're attached units. And that's all I have. I'd be glad to stand for any questions you have.
Thank you. Commissioners, do you have any questions for the applicant?
Mr. Chair,
Commissioner Smith, go ahead.
just to confirm, I think I saw on the last slide, you don't have any issue with any of the conditions in the staff report?
We do not.
Thank you.
Good. All right. I'll just have you sit down because I'm pretty sure the people in the room are here for something. This is the last application, so.
Mr. Chair,
Mhm.
Dave White, I have signed up.
Evening, sir. For anybody coming up to testify, we'll need your name and address for the record before you start.
Hi there, I'm Dave White. I live at 2884 East Darcy Drive in the Keep, just north of the subdivision. We've lived in either Century Farm or the Keep for the last 3 years. And it's been a challenge moving in and out of South Meridian. Obviously, we know that development's a part of living here and we love it. Our only request really was on the densities. I don't know, based on my research, it seems like it fits within what the staff is recommending. But our infrastructure in this area, even with the widening and everything that's going on, it seems like when one road opens, another closes. And so it's really challenging for us. We also have a lot of kids live in all these neighborhoods, and we just want to make sure that we're not putting too much density all collected around, this intersection specifically for traffic and safety. That's my thoughts.
Right. Thank you, sir. Madam Clerk?
Mr. Chair, the next person I have on the list is Jeff Lucky.
Chairman, council members, my name is Jeff Lucky. I'm currently residing at 4355 South Langdon Avenue in Meridian. I sent a letter. I don't know if you had the chance to read it. If you want to feel good, you might, because I complimented you significantly in there for what I see as people embracing the vision and values of the community for growth. And I frankly think you've done a very nice job. I purchased a plot of land at the Keep 3 years ago. I waited to begin building until just recently. I made the decision, saved up all my pennies, and I decided that I could afford to live in a low-density housing community. And I made that decision on the data that I read from June of 2022, which showed the land here in question as low and medium density. So that's why I'm standing here. I am seeing what I believe in that vicinity, what I think, and I'm not an expert,
a disproportionate amount of medium to high and high density approvals for zoning. But I'm not challenging that because I actually think you're doing a wonderful job in managing the growth of the community. What I am challenging is the concept of annexing further and then compressing what was already color-coded as low and medium housing and making it something different. I started researching this when I heard this was coming about, and for the life of me, I cannot find anything that talks to growth of Eagle Road south of the intersection at Lake Hazel. Big intersection coming, the feeders going all the way down to Locust Grove and the other way. All of that is, you know, huge roundabouts looking fantastic. But you take one step south of Lake Hazel on Eagle, and all you see is a sidewalk for the keep. Across the street, if you step off the road, you're going into the ditch. And I mean, you're going down. You go up a little further, you've got Skybreak. I'm going to round up to 300 or so homes in there. And then you go down further, you go past the church that's there, and then you get to some properties that this property that is in question kind of wraps around. My question is, was there a study done for traffic improvement that would support 5, 7, 1,000 doors in that short vicinity along Eagle Avenue? And if there hasn't been a traffic and safety impact study, I would first ask why. But you're moving fast, so maybe that's why. But I would also caution you to take pause here and think about it, because I'm trying to figure out how a child gets on a bicycle and goes down Eagle Road towards the intersection of Lake Hazel. Now, it may not be this developer's problem, but it's somebody's problem. And the safety of the children is paramount. So growth is one thing, challenging the rate of growth, but you have to do what you have to do. I would ask you to take pause and think really hard about annexing, compressing, without something factual about the safety of the roads right outside the property.
Okay. Thank you, sir. Mark?
Mr. Chair, those two that we have called marked that they wish to testify. The others on the list did not mark that they'd wish to testify.
Who else would like to testify? Just have to raise your hand. Come on up, sir.
My name is Brian Miller. I live at 6876 South Pemberley Place in the Keep. My house essentially backs up. I think we saw it in one of the pictures that was up there. So I appreciate that you've been willing to take the comments on this subdivision. I'm here to express my position that this should not be approved at the current density that the developer is talking about. Many organizations in our communities make their plans around our future land use plan that has been in place now for several years. When they plan, as we talked about roads before, is simply they're rebuilding the Eagle and Lake Hazel subdivision or intersection right now based on what was probably what they thought would be the use going south. If you were in any of our other organizations who are also making plans around that, could probably reasonably expect that land to have had 80 to 100 houses on it based on that designation. And now it's over 250 is the proposal. I mean, that's a massive expansion. If we were to consider for the schools, for instance, right now, Mountain View and Victory Middle School have the highest attendance in the West Ada School District. This is an area in which I'm not sure if the developers contemplated which schools the subdivision would attend, because the school district boundary cuts the development essentially by about 1/3 into Cuna and about 2/3 into West Ada. Cuna is so overcrowded, they can't pass a bond. They are bursting at the seams. They've been asking for developers to contribute at least $3,200 per house to the building fund so that they could help contribute to new schools because they can't fit any more students in. Meridian Fire Department, in their comments on this very subdivision, pointed out that there was risks associated with it, that they can't meet the current response times, that they don't have water rescue. There's both a canal and a pond has been pointed out in the subdivision. Yet, many of these kind of concerns could simply be allayed by reducing the density. By reducing the number of people in that area, we reduce the risks of needs for the fire or for water rescue. We could reduce the needs to have additional buses on roads and additional schools being built. I'm not saying that subdivisions should not be built, simply that the density is too high. All of these entities in our neighborhood, in our communities have planned on being able to build around this. I'd like to point out that in the proposal, Bailey Engineering offers no compelling reason why they should go to high density. Simply that they would like to build a lot of houses. They don't say that there's any benefit. They point out things that there is connectivity and amenities, but all those could be done with low density housing as well. There's no compelling reason to do this except for the developer's profits. I mean, there's people here today in this meeting who have made their decisions, who've made their plans, in addition to all these organizations in our community. Those should matter more than the developer's profits. It's nice that CBH wants to turn a profit. I'm sure they can on a medium and low density housing. There's no reason, like I said, Bailey has offered nothing that says, yes, this would benefit our community. And that's all I really have to say.
Thank you very much, sir. Appreciate that. Anybody else? Sir, come on up. Good evening.
Good evening. My name is Jaron Langston, 6865 South Pemberley Place, Meridian, Idaho 83642. So I know a lot of you guys. I was the developer of the Keep subdivision, and so I get all the feedback, the colorful feedback. I think really the biggest concern for the residents in my community there is really obviously the density. We've talked about safety. You know, I'm currently in the process of developing another phase of the Keep, which will be on the west side of the Keep Phase 1. And when I had my neighborhood meeting with the residents there, I kind of proposed a more medium density development, of which, you know, the neighborhood came to me and said, hey, we're nervous about the kids. We're nervous about safety. We're nervous about what this could potentially do to our property values. Is there any way you could do something similar to what you did with the Keep? You know, so me, just like Bailey engineers and their developer, we want to be profitable. So I went back to the drawing board, looked at, okay, what do I need to do? You know, I went from 38 lots to 22, which is where I'm currently at. And so I think a lot of the concern here is that transition, right? They said that, yes, they've met the designation for the R2 zoning or the size requirements. The average lot size in the Keep was 33,000 square feet per lot. The smallest lot in the community was 24,000, just over 24,000. Their biggest lot that's neighboring the Keep is about 12,500 maybe on average. So I think if there was a transition of 1-to-1 at a minimum, I think that would appease a lot of feelings within our community, especially for those residents. Then I know the Smiths, they have a 5-acre parcel to the west, and so do the Wilkins, who's a deputy for Ada County. And they've got, you know, now, I don't even know, it's larger lots, you know, upwards of 5 to 10 lots per their 5-acre, which again, we don't expect a 1-to-1 maybe on the 5 acres. But again, I think that transition, if it could be a little bit healthier, a little bit larger would appease a lot of problems. Yeah, I think that's everything I'd like to share. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Is there anybody else? Sir, come on up.
Craig Smith. I have the property at 7191 South Eagle Road, which directly borders the east portion of this this proposed development. I'm under construction right now, and I echo what everyone else has said, and I have 5 children, and this is my forever home. I have 5 acres right here. I bought it. I paid a premium because I thought that this was going to be low density, and it scares me, for one thing, to know that this road right in front of my house, I mean, like most of this community is going to be passing right by my property with my 5 kids. I also wish that right here where they've got, looks like about 5 dwellings per acre butting up against my property and the Wilkins just south of me, which are both 5-acre parcels, which there's no intent of ever putting any more homes on those parcels. That would just make a huge difference to me if it just wasn't such a, like, they made concession to the keep, but I even have a larger, I mean, I've got 5 acres there and we've got all these homes butting right up against us. And it just makes me really sad to see that after what I've tried to create for my family. That's all I have.
Okay, thank you, sir. Is there anybody else that would like to come up and testify? Ma'am, come on up. Evening.
Chairman and commissioners, my name is Carrie Miller. I live at 6876 Pemberley Place in the Keep. Maybe I'm a little too close to that. I just, first of all, want to thank you for being here and letting us talk to you. A little bit of my background, I grew up on a farm and my dad raised cattle and he had 10,000 acres of land. And there was a spot on his farm where there was a pre-existing pond that he asked that he could build a reservoir. And that was to irrigate some of our crops. And it was already on our property. And in our thoughts, it was going to provide more places for wildlife to be. However, it was denied for my dad. And at the time, I thought, how could it be denied? And now I live in the Keep. And my house butts up to this subdivision that is being proposed. And if you had gone to the subdivision, it is this area behind our house, it is beautiful. The pond that they already pointed out and the big trees, huge trees that are going to be cut down that are mature and absolutely gorgeous area. I'm not proposing that we don't have a subdivision. I am proposing that the subdivision that they are asking for isn't at all what we said that we were going to have when we first moved into this property. We have lived in Boise for 18 years, and 17 of those years we have been saving to build our forever home. And right now, when we decided to build that place, we were told that this was going to be completely different than what it is being proposed. And I feel like that some of that should be respected. Some of those feelings and concerns that we have for those of us that have saved for a very long time to be able to build our forever homes. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Anybody else like to come up? Going once? Going twice? Oh, sir, come on up. Given your name and address, you can ask for whatever you'd like.
Matthew Pond. I live at 2865 East Wickham Court in Meridian in the Keep. Is there a picture of that's panned out with the like the satellite view?
I don't know.
I thought I saw one that kind of showed the proposal with the other neighborhoods. Yeah, if we can kind of look at that and kind of toggle back and forth between that plat plan, because the thing we were talking about, talking as everybody else has said, and I honestly haven't spoken at a city council meeting since I was 12 years old for my Boy Scout award, Boy Scout merit badge. So if we can look at the plan, that satellite view, and we're talking about that transition, if we look there, we have, I count the 2 5-acre properties, low density residential, plus 1, 2, what is that, 4 lots there in the Keep, zoned at the R2 low density residential. And if we fast forward the transition to the plat plan, looking at just that one area, There's now, where there were 4 lots, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, at least 8 lots I'm looking at without looking at it there. So I think what a lot of people say, and I'm just gonna reiterate it again to beat that dead horse, that transition, it's maybe meeting the overall letter of the law, but definitely not the spirit of the law as far as, that low density, the transition. You take away that little bit of a green space in the middle and you just kind of cover up like this, we're not meeting any of it. So that the transition from what the keep as true low density residential with 4 lots in that area up to whatever it was, 8 or 9, I think that transition point is kind of what we're focusing on and kind of emphasizing. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Anyone else? Okay. I will take a motion to close the public hearing.
So moved.
Second.
Wait.
Nope.
The applicant line come back up. Sorry. It's not that we're getting tired of you.
I would be. I get tired of myself sometimes.
Go right ahead.
David Bailey again with Bailey Engineering. Sure appreciate the comments of the neighbors on this, and I sure get their concerns, with the project. I guess I'd start with, when we talk about traffic on this thing, is that of course you guys and the highway district and everybody have done these studies on these, and we do the capital improvement plan every 6 years. I've participated in 3 of them over 15 years. And we take the city's comp plans first. And we take the city's comprehensive plan and we decide how many lots are going to be in a particular area going to impact the roads. And we build a model, which costs a lot of money to build that model and go through and plan these roads way into the future. What's going to happen? Then that boils down to a 5-year plan and then down to an individual plan. So the improvements that you're seeing being built just to the north of this have been on the books for 20 years. And they come forward because the model gives impact fees for the lots based on, it calculates the impact fees based on the cost of the improvements that we're going to have to build when they're built. So it's a responsive model that we have in the highway district and the cities, and they all participate in this. It's a responsive model. As we build these, we'll provide the money to build the roads adjacent to them. In addition, for every single project we do that has more than 100 lots, and this clearly does, we provide an individual traffic study that takes into account all of that traffic information, projects that are in the process and have been approved, recent traffic studies, and look at whether this is appropriate. And it looks at improvements to not only within the site, but all of the major roads around and all of the intersections within a scoping area that they provide at the beginning. So there's a lot of homework that goes into the traffic for these. And one of the issues of this is that collector street that we built through this whole project benefits everybody in the area, benefits the projects to the west. There's a Lennar project to the west of this, which is, connected in here, which will connect this street through to Eagle Road, provides this mid-mile collector, provides fire access, provides emergency services access, and access for people to get to where they want to go, whether it's Meridian Road or Eagle Road in this area. So, the traffic planning really does get a lot of thought, and I know I'm preaching to the choir here, but I guess when we get the questions asked and I get a podium to answer them, I think I feel a duty to do that. This project has been accepted and reviewed by Ada County Highway District. They have provided us conditions of approval, which we have agreed to, and we're going to meet all the requirements and pay the impact fees they require for this project. We do not have a concern with the roads not meeting the requirements or that the roads aren't going to be there. And I get it. Eagle Road's a 2-lane road right now, adjacent to this site, but probably by the time it's built out, we're going to be seeing that those lanes built out there and keep our neighborhoods safe. I guess kind of the same thing goes for fire, is that the fire department has reviewed this, they've approved it, we got a recommendation approval for your staff, and they're going to be able to provide safe, adequate fire service to this site, and we're confident of that. And if we can't at some point, then the city stops us regardless of our approvals, right? That's necessary to do. As far as the density of the project, haven't been involved in the process since we used the comprehensive plans to build the model that we do for this area for everybody's planning. they usually use in the mid to upper ranges of the comprehensive designations, right? So we're talking about 3 to the acre on the low density portion here, which wasn't even taken up by the keep. Granted, they got bigger lots, but that density of use here for the planning we've done has not been taken up within that area. And in the medium density residential, they're probably going to use about 4 to 5 to the acre when they do their traffic model for that end of it. So I would argue that the density of this project has been included in the plans of not only the highway district, but of your fire department, of your city planning department, your emergency services, you know, and the sewer, certainly the sewer and water departments have this plan to provide adequate services. Schools as well, although they're a little more disconnected from this, and certainly the city has the ability to deny an application if the schools don't have adequate capacity to handle this. But I haven't heard any of that, and the schools have, you know, have not said a comment that we can't serve the children in this community at this density. Comprehensive plan is what it is. You folks create the comprehensive plan, and their problem is not necessarily with this particular project, but their comments are about the density that's specified in the comprehensive plan. And that's what we bring into you, is something that is reasonable, has reasonable density transitions on it, and provides the open space that you require, and provides what we think is going to be a really nice community for these folks and will not negatively impact these neighbors. 5 lots next to a 5-acre lot, that lot could develop into R4 reasonably. It's in the low, you know, you bring that in here with an R4 development on the lot, even though they don't intend to improve it, it's still eligible for that. And so should we say, well, we'll build their lots if they want to reduce their density in the future? It just doesn't work that way, you know, as we go along. We think we have provided a great transition across that far lateral so that these homes in this area will not impact them. We don't connect directly to their subdivision. Traffic won't go through there. Even pedestrian traffic from this development will not go through there. You know, and we have quite a bit of separation between those homes, which are on rather large lots, to the nice homes that'll be on rather large lots adjacent. So, you know, as far as a compelling reason, you know, we think this thing brings a lot of benefit to the people who will live here, who will be members of the community, and it brings a lot of benefit to the city as well. We get a pathway, we get pathways in here, we get a collector street built through here, we get nice amenities in here, we get connections to your city park, we get connections between Eagle Road and Meridian Road, and we just add to the character of the community, which is very consistent with your comp plan and the goals of that. The landscaping we're doing, everything we do within there is really consistent with building more of the Meridian you ask us to bring you, right, with your comp plan and your standards. So that's how we got here. I hope I addressed stuff there, but if I didn't, I'd be glad to stand for any questions.
Okay. Thank you, David. Commissioners, questions, comments? Oh, hold on a second. Yeah, generally, we're not going to call you back up. So if there's
Mr. Chairman, can I interject? So
Go right ahead.
as the chair, need to make a decision, but you know, we can't have comment from the audience because we can't pick that for the record. So I think either you as the chair can make a decision to invite the gentleman back to the podium if you want. That would be atypical, or we probably need to not take testimony from the audience because we can't capture that for the record.
Understood. So at this point, and I can probably address some of that as we go into comments. So, but
Chair.
Yeah, Commissioner Smith, go ahead.
I do have a question. So I'm gonna be completely honest. I think the western half of the project I love. I think it's great. And I think I'm close to the eastern for the eastern half as well. I do. I get some of the concerns about the transition, and I know that you've made efforts to kind of create that transitory space. Looking at kind of some of the numbers, it looks like in that low density range, you're kind of pushing the upper end of the low density. But on the medium density area, you're kind of right in the middle of what that allotted space is. So with that kind of in consideration, I'm just curious, Could you walk me through, and you don't have to go into detail, but maybe how you arrived at like this level of this gradient, I guess, of increasing density as you get further west and south, and why, just as an example, you don't have necessarily maybe larger lot sizes near the north, offset by maybe some townhomes mixed in at the bottom as to the transition, into that medium density. Just because you walk me through kind of the decision making for this level of density at the very top, and kind of a smoother transition versus maybe something that starts a little bit less dense and then gets a little denser near the bottom. That makes sense.
Mr. Chairman, Commissioner Smith, I want to make sure I understand your question first, is that I think you're asking, should there be, what was the thought process that went into making the transition, right?
Yeah, this specific level of density.
At this specific level of transition. And in my experience, and I laid this out myself, so I'm the right one to talk to about this, is that usually we'll look at adjacent lots for transition purposes, and your code doesn't specify. There's no specific code for this. Am I wrong on that? Some consideration, but there's no dimensional said you have to meet 2 for 1 or thing like that. But we do understand those standards, and in historically, Boise City used to have a 2 to 1. CUNA used to have a 2 to 1 or 1.5 to 1, or you put a number on it, right? The city Meridian code does not, but we still look at that when we do the transitions, that we don't do more than 2 to 1 is usually kind of my rule, and that's on the immediately adjacent lots, right? And a lot of times we'll have requests to not do 2 stories on those, even if they're 2 stories on the ones next door. And, we often try not to follow those because they don't make sense. The distance you're away when you're doing those transitions doesn't make sense, but we don't have that problem here. The other thing we'll look to do is if we match the size of the minimum lot size in the zone for the adjacent lots, right? Then that in our experience is a really great transition, right? So I'm not even going 2 to 1 from their zone. So there could be a lot on that side that would be, 12,500 square feet. If I meet that, then here, and we're asking for an R8 zone, so obviously they could be a lot smaller within that. But we didn't think that would be appropriate. So usually matching that zone minimum size is a really good transition, okay, in my experience. Meeting less than 2 to 1 is acceptable, right? And then matching lot for lot line, if it's close, is what I'd really love to do in a lot of cases. But 24,000 square foot lots in here to match those one per one on those lot lines, or can I make these 90 feet deep, and 200 feet wide doesn't make any sense either. Matching those 1 for 1 on there didn't make sense for this area and for this builder, right? This building on a 24,000 square foot lot doesn't make any sense for them. But we do want to provide a transition. What this also does, it makes those lots really deep. So those houses are going to be closer to the road, big backyards, you have the pathway in between that, plus the far lateral as separating view for those. So that's on the immediate adjacent stuff. When we have really large, like 5-acre parcels in there, I'll say, what could it be zoned to? And we would match that zone of what would be reasonable for them to develop. So that's the east side is what we did here. And then we'll usually do another tier of in between. So we go from R2 to R4 size, which we did there. Those are matching that size there. And then we'll move down into the next zone from there. So they're R8 below that. As far as, we certainly always want to maximize the density on the property without just overdoing it, right? I mean, that's just our job is to see that. That provides homes for people at the prices that make sense for them to buy it at, so all that goes down the road as doing that. So the reason we didn't provide more there, and we just pushed against that 3 to the acre limit, but we made sure that we were under that and that we weren't violating any requirements. And we think this is a really great transition, for those neighbors there. I can't ask them to agree with me on that. But in my experience and a lot of lots I've done, this is a really good transition.
Thank you.
Other questions?
Mr. Chair, I have a question for
Okay.
staff. When there is in regard to transitions from R2. Is there anything in code that says it needs to go to R4 before it goes to R8, or is there some, because there's a lateral in between, it's not considered adjacent?
Mr. Chair, Commissioner Lorcher, Commissioners, there is nothing in the code that requires a transition. There are policies in the comprehensive plan and goals so far as transition, but there's nothing specific.
So it's really up to the discretion of the developer?
And the approval body, yeah, commission and council as well.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That was a question.
This is annexation, so you could require, a greater transition if you'd like.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chair,
Mr. Smith?
I do have one other question I just remembered. I know there was some discussion about trees, maybe some older growth trees. I don't know the specifics of the trees in that location. But have there been has there been any discussion or consideration on your end about opportunities to kind of maintain some of those trees where possible, or to, transition them somewhere else instead, rather than cutting them down? Just curious about any of those thoughts or discussions.
So we've had a lot of discussion about that obviously, and our plan here is to, to keep some of those around the park, in the areas where we can, around the pond there where we can keep them. But in addition to that, we have a landscape plan that meets the city's requirements for the preliminary plat, but you do have a landscape ordinance specifically and a city arborist, and the requirement in the condition of approval that we provide all of the mitigation required for all of the trees that are there. And so we'll follow that plan. Our landscape architecture will be that, and they'll be counted as we go along to provide that mitigation. And as we understand, there's going to be some mitigation required off-site, probably even, because we probably may not even have the room to do it all we need to do here. So, but we're fully prepared to meet the city's code requirements, and to go through that and meet that.
Thank you.
Any other questions? All right. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you very much.
With that, I'll take a motion to close the public hearing for file number H 2023-0050 for Revel Ridge subdivision.
So moved.
Second.
Been moved and seconded to close the public hearing for file number H 2023-0050. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. The hearing is closed. So I'll jump in on this. Try and address both sides of it. So first off, I'll just address the schools. So my least favorite issue, and the thing that I disagree with probably the most adamantly, is how the cities do business. So their models are, if you build it, we will come. That's how they fund this. That's how they build these. That's why the schools get super overcrowded. And then they build a new school, and then they're not overcrowded. And then they build, and then they get overcrowded. So, I mean, that's just the way they operate. And to me, that's frustrating. So it's gotten to the point in Meridian where they don't even submit a report anymore, because it provides no value. Basically, they can't say they cannot service it. So I recommend that you go to the school boards for this and let them know that that's not okay, because to me, it's not okay. It's why, my son attends a charter school, because the public schools I've had other children that were in our public schools that went through this. Overcrowded, not overcrowded, overcrowded, not overcrowded, as communities grow. So I don't necessarily agree with the model that they use for that. Unfortunately, it's the model that they use. As far as the roads, and just the way that I go about some of this stuff, because I think that the growth in Meridian, in order to be responsible, that we have to look for areas that we can pump the brakes. So schools are one of them. If the school presents a really good case, and again, I've been doing this for 6-7 years now, I've never had the school district present a good case as to why not to do this. They've always said, yes. That's all they ever say. So ACHD, they have submitted reports that show that the roadway systems are not going to support what's going in. Don't currently support it, won't support what's going in. Great reason to pump the brakes. And we have, we've recommended denial or denied applications that have come through on that. So we try to be mindful of that as we move forward. Fortunately or unfortunately, this area looks really good as far as roadways. I mean, the roads around this whole area are set to develop to accommodate all this traffic. That's not something we're used to. I live in the area of Black Hat and Ustick, where those two roads intersect. Trust me, I feel your pain every time I have to go through that intersection. Before there was a stoplight in there, it was almost impossible to take a left turn to go west on Ustick. So completely understand what you're saying, but again, this area to me has developed better than a lot of places in the city. My first home was in Cuna, so I completely understand. You go south of Amity or other roads that are out there. Yeah, there's not a lot out there, but I guarantee there will be. Last time I drove down 10 Mile Road out to Cuna, I had to pull over because I thought it was lost. I thought maybe they extended the road over the river or so over the creek out there because there was just so much development out there. I didn't even recognize it until I got to what's now the junior high. So surprising amount of development that's happening out there. So as far as the application itself, I do agree that the transition could be better, but it's really hard to make, it's hard to develop a product at this stage of our growth and how much housing costs that's going to align correctly with that, adequately. 1-to-1 is probably never going to happen. So, I mean, the idea that, acre lot to 5 acre lots are going to be readily available in Meridian is probably a thing of the past, just because it's just so expensive to do that. There's just so few people that can actually do that anymore. So being responsible about the lot lines and having just the acknowledgement that 2-to-1 is really what we try to do. And we really press hard on people to try to meet that requirement. Try to line the lot, try to line things up as much as humanly possible. Where you do have yards that back up to each other, don't put windows on the second story, just things like that. We've been through this and we fight pretty hard for those things as they come through. This application, honestly, there's no shared driveways. The transition to me looks like something that was very well thought out, because we get so many applications in here that are just cookie cutter, and they are literally designed to cram a house on every square foot that they possibly can. They're pushing every limit that they can on there as far as how many houses they can put in there. The least amount of amenities they can put in there. They don't want to put in 10-foot pathways. They kind of argue everything as it goes forward. This is not one of them. I mean, they basically have a park in the middle of this thing. They're doing 10-foot pathways. They're working with their neighbors to connect the 10-foot pathways to provide safe connectivity to the park system. So speaking to the gentleman that has kids, this is going to help your kids safely get to the park. I mean, this right here is golden to me. Where I live at, there's a section that's between Linder Road and 10 Mile Road that has basically the same thing there, a 10-foot pathway with just little amenities along the way, little tiny parks, little tiny tot lots and things like that that are along the way. I can't describe how much better that makes the community to have that safe passage between two very, very busy roads. Unfortunately, it just ends at Linder Road. It just comes out, spills on a road that has a lot of schools, doesn't go anywhere. So we have a lot more work to do. But things like this, to me, definitely do provide some of that safety that you're looking for your children. So, as I think about, they're going to want to go to the park. What's the safest way to get there? You have a 10-foot way, pathway in the middle of a giant green section that's going to get them there. So that helps. As far as the higher density housing that's out there, I also have a son that's, he's wants to stay in this community, really, really does. Has a great job. He's an engineer out at Micron. Is not married and struggles to afford a house. Every time he thinks he's got 20% socked away, he goes and tries to bid on a house and gets outbid by 10 grand. It's tough. It's hard play. He's a smart kid. He's done everything right. It's hard for them to live in the community. So that's what this, a lot of this housing to me represents. The ability for somebody to have some affordable housing in there. And there's all kinds of people that are going to be living in our communities. So I live in a nice house on a nice sized lot. I can appreciate the fact that not everybody can do that. So I don't look at those, I don't look at people that can't live where I live or how I live as if they're going to lower my property values. So I haven't seen a property value in Meridian lower since I bought my house over a decade ago. So we're still a pretty hot commodity. So there's not much that's going to drive down the value of property in Meridian at this point. I mean, if development stops, then yeah, that'll drive down the price of your house. So anyway, I hate to get too preachy on this, but I really liked this application for a lot of the reasons that I just mentioned. I mean, they're not using every square foot to try and cram everything in here. They're just doing a lot of things right here. So to be honest, I wish more developers developed like this. So that's all I got. Sorry to get a little preachy there.
Mr. Chair.
Go ahead.
So wanted to add some thoughts. I think you covered a lot well. As I may not look it, but as someone who has only been able to afford a home in the last couple of years, despite the balding head, and starting a young family, I've been in the position that you're talking about of not being able to afford to live in your hometown. And so I get that. I also get the concerns of, concerns around transition space and things like that. I think you're spot on. I live in a spot near Settlers Park, but there is a development between. And rather than an obstacle, that is the route we take rather than walking down Meridian. It feels safer. It feels more pleasant. You can ride your bike down and not have to worry about constantly looking over your shoulder at traffic, making sure that you're safe. One thing I wanted to add regarding this, I think I agree that this is developed really well relative to some other areas in the city. I'd encourage you guys to look at the integrated 5-year work plan that the city submits to ACHD every year. There are some areas that are not in very good shape, and I think Black Cat and Usick is one of them that's been on that list for a bit. But I think another thing that's helpful is with that integrated 5-year work plan, it is rolling, and so we're constantly looking 5 years out. I have the pleasure of sitting on the Transportation Commission as well, and we just put to the City Council what we think it should be the integrated 5-year work plan, and we're constantly tweaking that and making adjustments based on developments and changes to traffic patterns and things like that, and working with staff to make the asks that we make to ACHD or recommend City Council make to ACHD fit the neighborhood. And I think one thing that we didn't mention that I really appreciate, especially given some of the concerns, is that phasing plan that we have an integrated 5-year work plan, that the phasing plan is 6 years long. I think there are some benefits there of being able to keep an eye on things and monitor, and by the time, if something happens in phase 1 of this development, by the time the rest of the development is complete, there's potential to have addressed it in the 5-year work plan. So I will stop myself from getting preachy, but I wanted to also just extend that as a resource to keep an eye on. And if you have concerns, there are other outlets to bring them to in the city and other commissions to ACHD, and they are heard and they are worked on and they are addressed. So.
Commissioner Warcher, anything?
Yes, briefly, Mr. Chair. I was concerned about the one person who testified that there was a bait and switch, that they were told one thing and it became something else. And I think about the story that you tell about Rock Harbor Church on Chinden. It's right in front of Spurwing Country Subdivision Country Club over there. Originally, it was proposed to be storage units, single-story storage units, and a person who lived in that subdivision said, not in my neighborhood, it's not going to happen. So they got the storage units out there that were going to be single story, and then a 3-story Rock Harbor Church went right in front of her subdivision and, blocked everything. And kind of channeling Commissioner Yearsley from years ago, you can only control where you live, and the surrounding areas around you, we don't own. And so if a developer comes in 3 years, 5 years down the line and fits the code, it's very difficult for us to say no, because it was already slated to be that way in the beginning. So I don't like the transition between the lateral to the lower density, because they're R2 and you're going straight to R8, but I understand that it's everybody's backyard and there's a lateral and there's a pathway in between there. But I have a 5-acre parcel as well, and I have the benefit of having 5-acre parcels behind me. So I don't have to look at that, right? It's not going to be part of my vision. And whereas you're going to be looking at your backyards, you're going to see, these houses, whether they're 1-story or 2. So from a design standpoint of the subdivision, I would love to see a little bit more less density just on that portion of it. But as residents of the Keep, whatever that real estate person told you what was going to happen, may or may not have come to fruition because they don't own it. It wasn't their development to be able to, to tell you. And so it concerns me that if a person's telling you one thing and it turns out to be something else, then they're not informed. And that's a disservice to you as homeowners who are buying something that you think you're going to get, and then all of a sudden, it turns into something else. So overall, I do like that plan. I'd like to see that transition a little bit less dense for those people who are in the Keep or whomever have those larger lots, because they bought that to have that open space. But I agree with Commissioner Smith and you, Mr. Chair, that these pathways are actually a huge benefit to this community.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, one thing.
Say, did you have something?
Oh, sorry.
Go right ahead, Commissioner Sandoval.
Yeah, Mr. Chair. I'll be quick. I echo everyone's thoughts up here, and I appreciate the testimony and concern. It does appear that it adheres to all the UDC and comp plan requirements, and I think the distribution density is fair. That's all I have.
Thank you. Mr. Smith?
Sure. Yes, sorry about that. I do think from the question we asked the applicant, and if I'm incorrect, someone please correct me. I do think that transition, just speaking to Commissioner Lorcher's comments, like the zoning is R8, but from what I understood based on the response is that it is the density that they have allocated is as if it is the minimum R2 lot size, and then it steps to R4 and then R8 as it gets south. Is that the applicant's nodding? So I think that is the case. So I do agree. Like if, I do have, it is about 2 to 1. If we could make it 1.5 to 1 or something, just a little bit nicer, that would be nice. But I personally don't have too much of a problem with it. I think doing that, I don't even know what other trade-offs elsewhere in the development that would create. And so I think to me, this looks like a good development, and I don't want to make the perfect the enemy of the good, I guess.
Anything else?
Mr. Chair, is that something that the city, when it goes to city council for annexation, is that something that they would take up as well, the transition? Would they, ask the developer to change it instead of 2 to 1 to 1.5?
Yeah, as I've been, just on this body alone, I've been, in annexation, we have a lot more latitude to kind of make sure that it fits. So as it's been, as I've been educated on it. So, and if that's something that you feel strongly about, what I've found is, I would be careful about putting something in there that's too rigid as far as a recommendation. That said, you do have to spell it out pretty well. And Kurt, if you want to add to that statement I just made, I would appreciate it for sure.
Mr. Chairman, members of the commission, I agree with that assessment. I think that with annexation, you have some discretion, and in particular, the finance requires in the best interest of the city, gives you quite a bit of latitude. So I think it's within your purview to make a recommendation in that regard. So if the commission as a whole is inclined to do so, I think that would be appropriate to include it in a motion or recommendation to the council.
I mean, I don't think I'm an expert on this. I just want to be able to point out to the city council that we have concerns about the transition. And I don't know how to put that in a motion, you know, just be aware that, you know, we have concerns about the transition. I don't have any specific numbers because I'm not qualified to do that.
Mr. Chairman, members of the commission, I guess two thoughts. One is I know for a fact that all of our council members review the minutes and or video of your meetings. So just by having the discussion you had tonight, I know that the council members will hear that discussion and will take note. So that's a possible course of action. Secondly, if you want to sort of craft a motion that is recommending approval in accordance with the staff report, which the applicant has agreed to in terms of conditions, and then add a supplemental thought or even a second motion that you would, you know, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but something to the effect that you would recommend that the council take a closer look at the transition from, you know, the keep to the northern portion of this particular subdivision. You could probably do it that way as well. So I think, but I will say again what I said just a moment ago. I know the council members do read your minutes and or watch your videos. So I know they get the message regardless, but you could make it more explicit by taking that second alternative.
And in the past, what we've done, I mean, essentially kind of makes, you know, you get to make city council, and they are the decision makers in it. So I call them, they're the bad guys, right? So, but what we've done in the past is basically just recommend that city council, you know, review the transition for appropriateness, just something along those lines. So it's not so rigid that, you know, it's kind of out of our purview, but at the same time, it's something that they genuinely know of just by, you know, reading of it, that's something that we want them to take a look at. Because again, I mean, outside of that, I mean, I personally, I have no issues with this development, so.
I trust your motions.
We're ready for a motion?
All right, Mr. Chair,
Okay.
you all might have to help me here, but I'll give it a go. After considering all staff, applicant, and public testimony, I move to recommend approval to City Council for file number H 2023-0050 as presented in the staff report for the hearing date of February 15th. And ask that the City Council review the transition of R2 to R8 along the far lateral between the two subdivisions as if to be in the best interest of the city. Is that right?
That was beautiful.
Okay. That's my motion.
Second.
Okay, it has been moved and seconded to recommend approval to City Council file number H 2023-0050, the aforementioned modifications. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay? Okay, motion passes. Thank you, everyone. Really appreciate your testimony tonight.
Mr. Chair.
We're not done yet.
We need to get our fellow commissioner.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, maybe your discretion, but if you want to take maybe a 3 to 5 minute break, that might be appropriate. We can retrieve our new commissioner, and maybe people would appreciate a quick break.
Yep, absolutely. And with that, we'll do a 5-minute bio break. Thank you. Maybe we could talk to somebody that has pull at the city. All right, we can go ahead and reconvene, and Caleb, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the commission. My name is Caleb Hood. I am the Deputy Director in the Community Development Department. We want to take this opportunity this evening to do some training, and we're going to try to get more in that groove. I know we're before you occasionally, but at least a couple times a year a lot of it will be refresher. Obviously, we have some new commissioners tonight, though, so try to get them started off on the good foot and just some best practices type of stuff, both in the legal realm. We also have a great opportunity, so I'm going to start with maybe just an introduction of the team that we have before you today. I did my introduction. So Brad Hoagland is formerly a bad guy. He has now seen the light, and he is a layperson currently, but he did serve 2 full terms on city council, not consecutively. He was appointed to his first term, then one reelection, was off for 8 years, something like that, and then was elected again and just recently came off. So before he purges his mind of all the bad memories of being on council, we asked him to come and address you from a council person's perspective. So that's really where I want most of our time this evening to be spent, is with Brad. His family, not only Idaho natives, but Meridian, Bridge Tower is his in-laws and so that's family, right? So, definitely, and he also served on in Mayor Kempthorne's office, he said, from 86 to 91, and then went to DC sometime there. But I know his heart is in Meridian, and even though he's not there on Tuesday nights, he still cares about our community so much that he's willing to spend a good portion of his Thursday evening with you, just sharing some of his experiences on council and maybe some feedback for you to consider as you make recommendations like you did this evening. So, and then Kurt, he doesn't necessarily need an introduction, but he's going to do some of the legal do's and probably more importantly, the legal don'ts. He said it's dry and boring, but it's not. I sneak peek at some of his slides, and I think some of the things you see he'll make it entertaining anyways. And then finally, I'll finish with just some of, again, best practices, things to consider, body language, how to ask good questions, the dialogue you should have to make your meetings most effective and efficient. So you don't have to take it all as gospel, at least not my portion. I would ask you listen to Kurt's and follow that advice. Mine's just, again, sort of best practices and lessons learned and stuff. So with that, I think we are going to kick off with Kurt. And I do want to say too, feel free to interrupt us as we go through. There will also be some time at the end too. So again, we want to make sure we're addressing any questions, concerns you may have, just in general, even if we don't cover the topic here this evening. So, sure.
Thank you.
Thank you, Caleb. Mr. Chairman, members of the commission. So I really do have the drier portion of the presentation. I'm looking very much forward to listening or to hearing from former council member Brad Hoagland. I think that'd be some great tips, and I'm hopeful you have a little bit of interaction and some time for questions and answers. So I'll cover my material, but it's dry legal stuff that
I thought it was going to start out with.
Exactly. Actually, I'm going to also go off script a little bit. I'm going to say that when it comes to PowerPoint presentations, I'm a real boring kind of guy, bullet points and so forth. So I actually, one of my colleagues, Emily Kane, produced a version of this, and I sort of plagiarized. So I want to give her credit because I would never do anything this clever with owls and things of that nature. So she deserves all the credit. Otherwise, you'd be looking at simple bullet points, and that'd be the extent of it. They even had a flying owl there for a moment. So I'm gonna talk about 2 topics tonight. We've at different meetings, and from time to time, we talk about a lot of different legal topics. The 2 I'm gonna talk about tonight are the Idaho's open meeting law, and then also ethics and conflicts of interest. So those are 2 topics that come up fairly frequently. Good that we're aware of the rules that we play by Hoyle. So just briefly, credit to Idaho and to our legislature. We've had on the books for some time now requirements, and many states do, that we do our business in public. Our role as volunteer commissioners, as staff members, as council members, that we're here to serve the community, to listen to our community and make it a better place to live and work. And we do that by being open and transparent and listening and really providing a conduit for people to testify and to be able to provide meaningful input. And so a big part of that is our open meetings law. So it's good practice and it's a good way to run government, and it's also a legal requirement as well. So all that comes into play. Let's titles a reference to state law where that's located at. And I think that quote there, I won't read it in its totality, but the quote I think actually does a nice job for sort of a legislative intent language out of state code. But I think it does a nice job of really describing we're here to serve the people, not vice versa. And for that reason, we have open meetings. Spoiler alert, yes, the open meeting law does apply to the Planning and Zoning Commission, as you're all well aware. And so it certainly applies to, in a city context, applies to the city council, but also to other sub-agencies, which is sort of a term of art used in state law, and that definitely includes the Planning and Zoning Commission. And so we as a body are subject, or you as a body are subject to that law as well. It applies, and I don't think I have a slide on this, so let me just kind of digress just for a moment. So the idea is obviously when you're talking, when you're talking business, in our context, what I mean is when you're talking planning and zoning commission topics, whether that's something before you today or something that might be coming before you in a week or a month, that's when the open meeting law applies, and when we need to have everything on the record and be transparent and be open. Doesn't apply to, you're having a side conversation with your colleague, maybe before the meeting starts or afterwards about what are you doing this weekend, or, how's the family doing? That's all fine. And, so social type stuff, no concerns. The only concerns apply to business related discussions and material, which means in our context, planning and zoning topics. Meetings are defined or the terms of what qualifies as a meeting is defined pretty broadly. So obviously, this is, what we did here tonight, and as you took testimony earlier today on different applications, that certainly is a meeting by, in anybody's definition. But beyond that, it includes that third row called deliberation. If you have a quorum, and in the case of the Planning and Zoning Commission, 4 or more members that are talking about even deliberation. So that means receiving information from one another or from outside sources, exchanging information or exchanging opinions. That all qualifies as a meeting as well. So, and even if that's done sort of in a serial way where, Commissioner 1 talks to Commissioner 2 and Commissioner 2 talks to Commissioner 3 and says, well, Commissioner 1 says they support this, and wouldn't you like to support this as well? That very quickly can turn into sort of what's sometimes characterized as a serial meeting. And so that is, would be an issue and a concern relative to Idaho's open meeting law. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this because we have a wonderful city clerk's office, and Tina and Chris keep us in good order. So in terms of our noticing requirements and making sure we meet our terms of posting requirements and timely and things of that nature. But we need to post our meetings timely. There are provisions that allow us to make amendments even after a meeting starts. That'd be very rare, and also limitations what we can do. So best practices, we try to get you agendas this is the statutory requirement, at least 48 hours prior to your meeting. We typically try to give it to you several days ahead of your meeting, so you have some additional time to review the packet, because there's often lots of material there. I think tonight a couple hundred pages or better. So we're mindful of that. We try to get it to you much sooner, so that you have some extra time to take a look at it. Open to the public, opportunity for people to participate meaningfully, and so forth. That last bullet point under Idaho law, we're required to, at a minimum, maintain summary minutes. The Meridian has chosen, and Dean does a wonderful job for us, has chosen to do verbatim minutes. We do that for a few reasons. One is in the land use context, it's probably one of the issues that is most ripe for potential litigation. And so it's nice to have the verbatim minutes when you need them, because when you need them, you need them. But importantly, I mentioned this earlier, is that I know several council members that tell me and others that, they read the minutes pretty religiously, and they like the minutes, perhaps former Councilmember Hogan can speak to that when he addresses you well. But I know that the public reads those minutes. I know that council members read those minutes as well. So they're important for a whole bunch of reasons. This is basically just a message that, there sometimes there are some creative ways to circumvent limitations and barriers, but the best rule is just use your good judgment. The idea is we want to do everything in an open environment. And so if you have any inclination, I always think trust your gut and trust your instincts, that, the goal here is to adhere not just to the letter of the law, but the spirit of the law as well. And so we're not looking for ways to kind of work around those open meeting requirements. We're looking for ways to comply with the spirit of the law. We talk, probably more than occasionally about ex parte communication, and we just did some training with our new commissioners a couple days ago and talked about that as well. But that's a difficult topic because sometimes you can't control that. So I think everybody, all the commissioners are pretty well aware that, are mindful of the fact that, what we do in open. We want information presented so everybody has the same information. They have it at the same time. We have a record that people can refer to. There's no surprises. There's no backroom deals. There's no secrets. Everything's done in an open environment. So I think we all do a fantastic job of adhering to those rules. The part that sometimes gets tricky is sometimes things just come out of the blue at you, and you before you know it, someone's already bending your ear about a project that might be coming before you, or you receive an unsolicited email or a phone call. And so, again, I ask you to use your best judgment, but all those things fall into that category of ex parte communication, which is problematic because, again, I mentioned we sort of in the area of land use is an area that's highly litigious. And one of the issues there is that, really sort of much like a court proceeding, all the parties have to be in the room hearing information at the same time, and we're having individual or sidebar conversations that becomes a potential legal problem, as well as just a due process and a fairness type issue as well. So it's important for you just to nip that in the bud if you can. If someone starts to bend your ear a bit and you kind of quickly pick up on what that's about, just politely say time out. I'm on, I actually serve on the Planning and Zoning Commission. I think this is a topic that's going to be coming before us. So for that reason, I really can't engage, and you can be polite about that. I think most people would honor that. Same for email and phone calls and things of that nature as well. That's important to try to honor that. There is a fix for that. So the best way is just try to avoid that happening or nip it in the bud very quickly before it goes too far. I recognize, and you probably had some experiences where just things happen and you didn't solicit it, and just not much you can do about it because it's already occurred. There is a fix for that, and occasionally we do that from the dais as well. And that is that, if that does happen, when the commission as a whole is considering that item, I would ask you as a commissioner to make that disclosure at that time and say, just for the record, Mr. Chairman, for the record, I like to disclose that so-and-so approached me, developer A approached me 6 months ago. I didn't realize this was coming before us, and I just wanted to, briefly describe the nature of that conversation. Just put it on the record, and that gets us back onto the right track. So we try to avoid that. The need for that, number one, and that's plan A. Plan B is when that doesn't work out so well, full disclosure, just a quick summary of what happened, and that gets it onto the record and kind of gets us back on track. I'm going to go through the rest of the open meeting stuff pretty quickly. You're aware that we can do, particularly during the COVID period and post-COVID period, we've become more adept at things like Zoom and telephone conferences and so forth, but the law does allow us to, we have to have a commissioner, at least one, in the room whenever we have a meeting, but other commissioners can and often do participate by Zoom. And we've used the old-fashioned telephone from time to time in a pinch when technology has let us down. Yeah, that's it. Commissioner Lorcher recalls that one. Let's see. Well, I'm going to mention here is, you could, again, I won't read that verbatim and you know much of this already, but I do want to just reinforce that we don't talk about often enough probably is that second bullet point about public records. So just want to, as a reminder, really anything you do, even though you're a volunteer commissioner and you get a big whopping paycheck of 0 every month, sorry about that. But even so, you're conducting the city's business. You've been appointed to serve on the commission, and you're doing the community's business and the public's business. And so records that you produce that are city related for city purposes are public records. And that means whether it's created on a city computer or on your personal laptop or your text on your text message on your phone. Hypothetically, if we're involved with litigation a year from now and someone says, I'm making a public records request for every communication that dealt with Project Y, that would include things of that nature. So just be mindful of that. And again, the idea is to have everything above board and in the record, and so there's no surprises on that. I'll just say there are, just briefly in terms of violations, there are jurisdictions that have had that issue, and it's a painful process. Number one, you get chastised by the court and may end up paying attorney's fees. And then the cherry on top is you have to go back to cure it, to cure the violation. You have to go back to square one and do everything again from the very beginning to cure it and make it, do it the way it was supposed to be done the first time. So it's something we all want to avoid whenever we can. I guess I shouldn't skip over that last bullet point too. There are, if a public official knowingly, and that's a high standard, but if you knowingly, that means you're intentionally violating the open meeting laws, that is subject to criminal prosecution. So there are some more severe sanctions if you are intentionally trying to evade the open meeting law. On ethics, I want to talk about two things. The first, very briefly, one is there are some specific requirements that apply to all public officials, and that means you as well as commissioners appointed by the mayor and confirmed by the council to serve on this commission, that apply ethical considerations and rules that apply to you. So the first is, kind of just as a general rule that you as a commissioner ought not be personally involved in business with the city. So contracts, if, hypothetically, if you owned a business and you wanted to sell services or products to the city, that's typically not allowed and would be an ethical violation, both in the Meridian City Code as well as under state law. There are, as I mentioned that last bullet point, there are a few exceptions, particularly for non-paid commissioners, which so you fall into that category. So there are some exceptions. My general advice is just try to avoid that altogether. But if there's something specific that pops up, in the context of what you do for a living and something where you have to interface with the city contractually, we can chat about that and see if one of those exceptions might apply. But as a general rule, our volunteer commissioners ought not do business with the city in terms of contracting for services, products, and things of that nature. The one I really want to talk about in a little bit more detail, and I'm coming close to the end of my presentation, but this one does come up fairly frequently, and it does have some penalties associated with it, including criminal misdemeanor violation as well. So this is one of the, in terms of all of our commissions, you all are the lucky ones. The planning and zoning commissioners, you are lucky there are special state laws that apply to you relative to ethical considerations and economic interests in particular. So under the Local Land Use Planning Act, the state's laws pertaining to planning and zoning, there's a special provision that applies in that context, which is referenced on the screen there, 67-6506. That is fairly stringent, more so than, certainly more so than our other city commissions. So it applies, so if you have any economic interest in an application that's before the commission, you really need to disclose that conflict and then recuse yourself and step out of the room, and we'll elaborate on that in a moment or two. That applies, and it also applies a little bit more broadly than some people might initially think about. So certainly it applies to you all as individual commissioners, but to the extent you personally have some type of conflict and an application before the commission might personally, might have a positive impact on property you own, for example, or a negative impact. It doesn't really matter which direction. That certainly would apply to you, but also in terms of relatives and to the second degree. So, and that's both affinity and consanguinity, meaning by marriage and by blood. So second degree, I always have to pull out a cheat sheet because my wife is a avid genealogist, and I'm terrible at that type of stuff. So I can never figure out the second cousins twice removed type stuff. That's just a mystery to me. But to just put some context, the second degree both by marriage or by blood. That includes obviously yourself, but a spouse, which would make sense, your parents, to the extent they are with us still, children, if that applies, father-in-laws and mother-in-laws, daughter-in-laws and son-in-laws would all apply, grandparents, brothers, sisters, brother-in-laws, sister-in-laws, and grandchildren. So it's fairly, and that's again by blood and by marriage. So that could be a fairly, depending on the size of your family and so forth, might be a fairly broad group. So that pops up from time to time. Again, I used this expression a little earlier, but I think it's always good to err on the cautious side. And I would just urge you to kind of trust your instincts and your gut. Number one is kind of the first test. Does this, feel odd in any way that I might know someone's associated with that might benefit from this decision or this item before the commission? Number one. And then secondly, highly encourage you to, as does state law, but to give me a call, or our city attorney, Bill Neri, give any of us a call, but the two of us probably would be the best to chat with. But we're happy to kind of brainstorm with that and provide some advice and counsel to you. And then if you rely upon that advice from, let's say you consult with me with your potential conflict, that also provides you some protection under the law as well, that you sought legal advice and you adhere to that advice. That provides some additional protection to you all for potential penalties as well. Oh, I did want to mention the recusal piece a little bit. So really best practice on that is the language in the code is, in the Idaho code, is fairly specific about you cannot participate in deliberations at all. So really, I think best practice is, and we don't always do this, we're not quick on the draw sometimes, but best practice is as soon as the item comes up on the agenda, as soon as the chair acknowledges that item is next on the agenda and we're getting ready to talk about, that'd be the appropriate time to say, Mr. Chairman, before we even open that public hearing or before we engage with the staff report, I just want to disclose to the commission that I have a potential conflict or a real conflict of interest. Here's what that is, and for that reason, I'm going to recuse myself. So you have to just a brief explanation. You don't have to go long on that, but just a quick little description of what that conflict is or the potential for conflict. Excuse yourself or recuse yourself from the meeting. And then I encourage you to don't leave the building, but you ought to leave the chambers, really. I think even if you sit in the audience, there's a perception that you might be influencing your colleagues in some way with the wink or the grimace or something of that nature. So my recommendation is make that announcement as soon as the item gets called or when it's next on the agenda. State what the conflict is about, recuse yourself, and then I think as Commissioner Garrett did this evening, did it fantastic to step into the conference room to the side of you there. That's a great place, or out in the hallways, fine. But I think outside of the council chambers would be my recommendation for you. I think this might be my last or second to last slide, is that we do both in city code, but also state law. There are some restrictions, and we don't talk much about this, but we ought to, particularly around the holidays. We just got past Christmas and all that kind of good stuff, but there are some fairly, particularly as inflation has eroded the value of a dollar, there's some kind of low thresholds for gifts in particular that you ought to be mindful of. So there are some restrictions on gifts obviously from anybody in the public, but from a developer in particular, or applicants that might be coming before you and things of that nature. So be mindful of gifts that we recognize, that law recognizes, and we're all human, that we all, exchange a gift from time to time for the holidays, birthday, things of that nature. So it's not prohibited, but there are restrictions attached to it. One is that the value cannot exceed $50. And today, $50 doesn't go all that far, quite frankly. So when you get that big giant box of candy, if you think it might be more than $50, maybe you think, that's very generous, but I can't accept that. Another fix for that sometimes, particularly things of that nature that are almost could be communal, is to say, accept it on behalf of the commission as a whole. I'm going to share it with everybody, right? I'm going to share it with all commissioners and staff and spread the wealth. And that's a way to kind of deal with that sometimes as well. But there is a cap. That's in state law and in the Meridian City Code of $50, no gift greater than $50. And then regardless of the size of the gift, if it's clear that the gift is intended to influence your decision in some way, regardless, even if it's under $50, that is not allowed as well. You know how to get in touch with me by email and otherwise, but as I said, for things like conflict of interest or any other legal topic, we're happy to help you out. Bill Neri is my boss. Our city attorney has a ton of experience, 20-plus years of city attorney work, and then has served as a planning and zoning commissioner in the past and as a city council member in the past. So super smart and seasoned guy. And then, of course, I'm happy to help you as well. And so feel free to call or pop by, and we're happy to do that. I will pause and see if there's any burning questions about any of that, but really importantly, I wanted to get to former council member Hoagland. He's the main attraction tonight. But anything I can answer that I glossed over?
Only that chocolate should be mandatory.
Yeah.
Sharing.
And
among-
share.
Yeah. I was going to say,
Definitely dark chocolate.
yeah, if we get $60 worth of chocolate, I'm sharing 10 bucks worth with you guys, and I'm keeping.
Thank you very much. That was good.
Yes, thank you, Kurt.
Welcome. All right, so I'm going to reintroduce Councilmember Hoagland, who's I think is really going to have some good material for you.
Thank you, Kurt. Appreciate it. Good to be here. And for the record, I guess I have to do this since I'm in front of the commission here. I'm Brad Hoagland, reside at 2470 West Trestle Drive in Meridian, Idaho. And Dean, for old time's sake, if I move too far away from the mic, just tell me speak into the mic, please. I kind of missed that part of it. No. First of all, I want to thank you for serving. This, for some of you have served for several years, and there's a lot of work to it. For you that are new, thank you for agreeing to it. You probably don't know everything that you've got yourself into, but you will soon learn, and I'm sure they're filling you in. But this is what makes our community work. It's the involvement of our citizens. I'm actually not a native. My wife is the native. I'm a transplant from that far off cold state called Minnesota. My parents got tired of winters in northern Minnesota, and we came out to Idaho in 1966 to Canyon County and moved to Meridian in 1970. And I went to sixth grade, starting at Meridian Elementary School. So I think in 1970, the population census came to about 4,900 people. So I remember the creamery. We'd ride our bikes when the volunteer fire departments, a siren went off downtown, that quintessential small town experience. And yes, I do miss elements of that. It really is a place that I enjoyed growing up. And during high school, worked on a dairy farm behind Coles. In fact, you can see the outbuildings there. It was the farm of Tom Davis. And that white building, in fact, I've talked to Blaine Johnston about it, is the old ice house. They used to have the interurban run through there, and the farmers would bring their milk to that building. And you can see it if you look kind of beyond, they got the brick house, and then there's this white building. And the farmers would bring their milk there to keep it cool, and then they load it on and it would go to the creamery, I think, in Caldwell at the time. So just those historical aspects when we talk about the silos at the Eggers place. And of course, Todd, the youngest boy, and I went to high school together, and Drew, I know Drew very well, but it just was a great place to live, even today. And I've got our son, oldest son, and my grandkids, 3 grandkids that live in this community. And, that was my purpose for serving. It was just to make Meridian the best it can be, even though it's not going to be what it was when I was a kid. And I know all of you want that, and that's why you're serving. So kudos to you and to Commissioner Smith. I think you're double or triple dipping in this commission work. So, you get extra okays. As you heard, and I've kind of split this up because there's things you guys already know, but might be to help reinforce for the new folks. So I kind of bounce back and forth here. But land use is different than any other issue. Mr. Starman laid that out there. It's one of those things where that word quasi-judicial body is really true. We're deciding things, and there's what comes out of this at the council level is the findings of facts and conclusions of law. And that's what, if we go to court over anything, that's what is being presented. So you help us establish those findings of facts, conclusions of laws, as does staff, in bringing that forward and helping us make that decision. So that's the difference. When people come up to you in store, and I had to get used to this coming from a legislative background, we're used to talking about anything that, that's before the body. You're used to talking to people, but land use, someone approaches you in the grocery store, you really can't. You say, hey, if you wouldn't mind, send me an email. I'll forward it to the clerk or come to the meeting. We have to have this on the record. It's one of those things. In fact, I've got, as a council member, people would email us with things coming up, and I had a form basically written up. I just send back to thank you for your comment. I'm forwarding this to the city clerk for the record and that sort of thing. So it's different than if we're doing a dog ordinance And people say, well, yes, I like this, or no, they have to be on collar and not whatnot. Don't let them run around in parks. We can talk all day about that and not have to worry about it. But for land use issues, it's very, very specific. But one thing I would encourage you to do is talk to staff beforehand. If you're going through the packet and you have questions, they're there to help you. I mean, they go through that information and they report, they prepare their analysis, and it's good information. So, and it really is about the details. As you guys know who've done it for a while, there are so many details that you have to review and take a look at. In fact, I went back, I listened to one of your earlier meetings, and it was about, and the big thing there was traffic flow. Can they move the traffic, and when they stop and let people out and all those things? And they had a traffic consultant and all going through those details. That's critical information, because that can make and break a project. But there's a phasing plan. And we saw that tonight. Road expansions. There's just a whole host of things that we have to look at, that by staff looking at it, you guys looking at it, and then council looking at it, we come to the best decision possible, I think. The hard part of all of this is that there's not necessarily a right or wrong answer. There is a lot of gray in this work. There's things that you prefer. Staff will align everything to the code. Now, I know that there's trade-offs in projects, and I know they have discussion on the staff level going, does this meet code? Does it not meet code? And there are things that they go back and forth on. So there's this I don't want to say there's not necessarily unanimity in what they decide. Same thing that's going to happen at this level, and of course at council level, same situation that occurs. Just because we're just dealing in some gray areas where there's not right and wrong answers. Like, we have preferences. But because there's a lot of gray, this is my advice, and try to give you perspective from that council area. Make sure that your voice is heard on issues of concern, and you do that. And having read, and I'm a minutes reader, some I know one person on council would watch the video or listen to the audio. To me, I can read much faster, and they're long. These meetings can go very long. So, and I'm mindful of that tonight too. You're doing this at the end of the meeting. But really, there's great value for the staff, for the council to understand why you made the decision you did. Because like I said, when we read things and yeah, we could go there, does it meet? It could, but maybe not. And there's differing opinions. How you got to that decision you made, again, I don't view it as right and wrong or wrong. It's just, okay, that was the process and what you considered to get to that point. And that's helpful to us. We want to know the basis of your recommendation and decision. That just is what we're looking for. How did you get there? And your reason, we like hearing the debate and discussions. I like reading that, because we do the same thing. We talk about why we think this is a good project, or concerns you have with a project like you did tonight. And because I read the minutes, I read the staff reports, I go through there, and I kind of form an opinion. I wasn't like, oh yeah, we're going to do this. It's like, okay, here's how I'm leaning. And I would go into the hearing kind of thinking, okay, I'm thinking this. And everybody does it differently. I'm just telling you how I did it. And so I'm leaning one way or another, thinking, man, I'm concerned about this, or I think, oh, there's a lot of things that look good about this. But as you listen to testimony and you go through reading staff test and the staff report, reading your minutes, reading going through the testimony that's there, reading new testimony that comes in via emails. So you get a flavor and a sense, and then listening to council members, and you're going to do that too, and I'm sure you do it here, is the fact that you hear other people and their viewpoints and going, maybe I think that's changing my mind. And I have been swayed by arguments and perspectives on council before by people who said, here's how I see it and why. And people have told me, Brad, because of your argument, I decided to support or oppose that issue because of how you how you looked at it, and I didn't realize these perspectives. So that's important. So what you say and how you say it and what you think is important is really important. Elevate remaining issues. You did that tonight. The silos is a great example of that. You know, hey, I think that's a great thing to do because, yeah, your opinion is important. You're here to serve and you have opinions about it to say, we think you ought to preserve those silos and try to do something with them. Great. Yes, now it comes to council and we go, okay, there are so many, then you get into the details. What's this going to take? And, whoa, that's going to cost that much? I don't think so. Or well, we can afford that. Where do we put them? Where do we find the money? So there's a whole host of things, but that opinion is important, that we need to preserve some of our history in Meridian. I agree with you, Commissioner. We haven't done enough. I'd love to see more, you know, but it is hard. It is very hard. But anyway, I guess I wanted to just say, have to remember, everyone has the best interest of the city at heart. Staff does, you do, city council members do. Even when we disagree at the council level, I knew that if Commissioner Kavanagh voted opposite of what I voted, I knew Luke wasn't wrong. He just saw the process to make Meridian the best it could be was different than my idea of what the best it could look like on that particular issue. So it's a good way to go about things. We didn't question each other's motives, and same here with council. So I guess I also want to say then, if council does it different than what you recommend, don't take it personal. Personally, I know staff doesn't. If staff makes a recommendation, sometimes you go a little bit different, and then we go a little bit different. But from when it gets to the council level, sometimes things have changed from what you have done. Because of the issues you have raised, you have made it a better project. They know going forward that we're paying attention to what you guys do here. So those issues that you've raised, they might come back on this past project, and I can speak to it because I'm not on council, but they might come in and they might change that density. I don't know if they will or not, but they might change that density a little bit on some of those frontage areas. So, but because you raised the issue, so elevate those issues, you know, highlight the things that you think deserve closer examination, because that is helpful. Yeah, and the failure, you know, don't think of it as failure if we don't go with the council, with the commission recommendation, because like I said, the changes, and you have 6 people up there, plus the mayor, who sometimes can have strong opinions about things, and we can be like herding cats, you know, serving as council president, as I've done 2 different times. That's an interesting dynamic, trying to keep people going in the same direction and coming to a conclusion. But again, I know that everyone had the best desires for our community at heart. I just wanted to touch on things. Schools, that's a great issue. We look at what ACHD says about, and we're involved in that, as you know, in the Traffic Commission 5-year plan, making recommendations, what the priorities are for our community. Schools is a different animal, Mr. Seal, you're right. We had a meeting with the school board and Dr. Bubb, and because that was an issue, state law gives us that much wiggle room on moratoriums. Because we're thinking, do we need in South Meridian, do the school issue moratoriums? But really, from a legal perspective, that's a very small area that we can operate. Usually it's a lot of emergency type stuff to place a moratorium. But the school came back and said, look, we have different things that we can do. We will move people, we'll bus people, we'll change boundaries, all these things, it's on us. So that's why we kind of went, okay. I mean, they are elected officials. They are, and growing up here, when having moved, when Meridian, where Coal Valley is now, that was used as the junior high. And then forgot the name of the junior high out on Eagle Road, and named for the former principal, superintendent of schools. Yeah, Lowell Scott, and I should know because he was the one that hired my dad as a teacher and a coach at Meridian. But we went to Lowell Scott when it was brand new for 8th grade, and people thought we were going to be corrupted by Norm's Bar across Eagle Road and all that. So then we came back, and what was the junior high was now a mid-school, 9th grade only for several years. went to the old Meridian High School, which is now the junior high, and then second class to graduate from Meridian High School. And within a few years, it was overcrowded till Centennial came along. My kids, raised them here, did spend 4 years back in DC. My wife made me promise to come back, and which we did. But growing up here, they were in portables. They're dividing lines that where because we lived on the north side of Eustic Road and on the west side of Linder, they were going to have him go to, when he started middle school, to Eagle Middle School. It's like, wait a minute, that's not my community. I mean, what about? What's wrong with Meridian and or Lowell Scott or those types of things? So yeah, it's a difficult one, and we've never built roads in advance of the growth. We've never built schools in ahead of the growth.
Yeah.
And it's interesting to see how that trend, and we see it in Nampa as well, how it impacts certain areas, but overall the enrollment is not skyrocketing like we thought it would. And I think it is because of charter schools, because of private schools, because some families having fewer kids, and some who move here, they're coming back to be with family and as grandparents. So anyway, I thought the best thing would be to allow you to ask questions of me. Having that perspective, it's still fresh, brought back a lot of memories. I just lost that twitch too, but what do you have questions that I'll try and answer for you about being on council and things you might go, why do you guys do this? So I can give you my opinion, but happy to answer anything that you want to ask.
Well, I'll start out, and it's something that I've kind of tried to talk to the mayor about a little bit, but we used to have joint meetings between city council and planning and zoning. We haven't had any for quite a while, and is that something that that you see value in? I mean, because I did when I'd only done 2 of them, but at the same time, I found a lot of value in those when we did them, just because of the being able to kind of speak freely about, and ask questions of council people as far as, why they thought about, a project in a certain way or something like that.
Sure. And Mr. Chairman, I think, and Commissioners, I do like that idea. We have to make sure that it's done properly, because there's always legal issues, and are we treading into areas that we shouldn't? But to have that ability to see how the council looks at things, or understand if staff has an issue that they think, hey, we're going to present to commissioners about because we're changing, we want to do some changes to comprehensive plan, and we're also going to go to the city council with it. Maybe that's an opportunity for a joint meeting, because I think it does help. There's a unity aspect to it, I think. Again, there might be differences of opinion on whether we do this or do that, but then you can deliberate in your body on things, and we do it in the council level. But I'm always a fan of more collaboration than less collaboration in terms of working together, even though because of the roles and the issues that we deal with, you can't be talking about that stuff. But on things that staff might have that would benefit both bodies, I like that idea, but I don't have any pull anymore, so.
Okay, thank you. Commissioners? Commissioner Smith, go ahead.
I'm still in the public hearing mode. So kind of drawing on when my first year in Transportation Commission, there's still kind of, each commission kind of had almost an ex officio member, and Councilman Kavanagh was on the, serving as an ex officio there. And remember a lot of times him being kind of a valuable resource in some deliberation, but kind of really being careful about the line of not dictating what council wanted to see. So now that you're not in that position where you have to worry about kind of that, are there any times where, you kind of get something and go, oh, I wish the transportation, or I wish the planning and zoning commission, or I wish, whatever commission would have thought about X or brought up this issue, et cetera, obviously none of us are, all of us are human, and we don't know everything, but are there times where you're just like, or specific focus areas where like, oh, they really missed the mark here?
Yeah, I don't think the commission's necessarily missed the mark. It's just sometimes things change, or they may not know from a council perspective what we're looking at, maybe long range in areas that we may understand and trying to plan. I remember when I was previously on council, we were working on the 10-mile plan. And, you know, there's a lot that goes into it and there's a lot of moving parts and you aren't sure what's going to happen. So the traffic commission, for example, may be thinking about things without really, and I think brought traffic commission in at some point, but that's been a lot of years ago. And I came in kind of in the middle of it. They had already started it. And back then council was only 4 members and I pushed for 6. I was the only one who worked a full-time job. Everyone else was retired or semi-retired. And I'm thinking, yeah, we need to expand to 6. And then when I decided not to run, I had changed jobs and the flexibility wasn't there to serve because it does take a lot of time. I mean, meeting times, you're like this, but that packet, there's a lot of reading to do. And I'm going to jump aside real quick while I remember this thought for the new members. Once you get some meetings under your belt and you're participating and whatnot, go back and read the minutes. It's helpful to me. I hated it because it will make you more succinct in your comments and how you do things because you see because I know I'd read the minutes and go, man, I started that sentence 3 different times. What was wrong with me? You know, you hate doing that, but do it every now and then just to check on yourself and see how you're doing. But it's going to take a while before you're talking like these do and making motions. And it does take a while because it's a unique process. So, but back to you, sometimes it's just not having the full information. And I do think that's where liaisons can be helpful. The downside of us growing as a city and having more work was when I became council president the last 2 years, when I was setting that up and people were going, and everyone in that group works and full-time jobs and some travel and saying, I don't have time to do everything that needs to be done. So there has been some loss. And I know some who were liaisons, I did hear back that they don't show up very often. You know, it's just an occasional type thing, which I understand. So it does help if you get folks who can serve as liaison. I do think, again, not that they weigh in, but sometimes can give guidance on perspective of future things or how it's viewed from a big picture standpoint. So yeah, if we get people who can do that, it's a good thing. But I don't know if it really depends on the individuals and their workload. And it is tough now because council members do get paid. It's a little bit. I think we figured out one time, depends on the week, but that week was $7 an hour. You know, it was one of those things. So
It was a good
Yeah.
week. There you go. Yeah. Well,
anything else?
I'll ask the question that we actually asked a lot of the candidates, just from your perspective. In Meridian, we talk about responsible growth, and what does that mean to you? And I mean, I value that perspective from council members.
We want to have it orderly. As you know, we don't like leapfrog development. And I remember, I wasn't on council again, but you know, the discussion with Hawaii High School, you know, because we know going out beyond, and Meridian High School was the same thing. That was out there, you know, because Meridian city limit, I mean, it's still within limits, but Meridian hadn't grown to that point yet. Because you know it's gonna impact an area and it will change. And of course, the state highway running through there is a big change. Orderly growth does mean different things to different people. And you know, we have a state and local land use planning act that dictates some of the things that we have to follow. Private property rights, if you look at the state code and different things, they have private property up there as number 1. And so, and that's the thing that you try to explain gently to people sometimes, and Mr. Chairman, you did a good job tonight, you know, trying to frame the argument that, you know, we have a comprehensive plan, we have zoning, we have different things that we set out as rules, and if they follow the rules, there's not much, unless we want to be sued as a city and end up paying big bucks of hard-earned taxpayer dollars, we kind of have to do certain things. So that orderly growth, would I like to see it a little slower at times? Yes, I would. But how do you do that when all the rules are met? It's contiguous, it follows the comp plan, ACHD says roads by that time will meet what's necessary. There's not much to hang your hat on to issue a denial. But at the same time too, there are developers that you really have to keep a close eye on who really try to barely get by.
Yeah.
And you deal with them, we deal with them. And there's the other developers, that, hey, they're going to do the things that even what's not asked of them because they really want to make a better community as well and make their project the best it could be. So that's a tough one, Mr. Chairman, because people do see it differently, and within the rules that you have to play by, you're limited by how much you can do to kind of squeeze that down. I wish I had a great answer for you, but I really don't.
No, and it is. It's definitely something that's I mean, it's a private answer for every individual. So I know, and I know both sides of it. So I've lived on the outskirts of Meridian 3 times now. So,
Exactly.
now I don't live on the outskirts anymore and right in the middle, exactly. So, that's just something that I've gotten used to, that I'm never going to live on the outskirts of Meridian again because it's just going to move. But, and I can appreciate having, bought when the market was affordable, and now having a son who's trying to find his way in this market. I've had tremendous growth in that, just looking at things differently, where when I first started, it was like, oh my gosh, who puts this many houses in a subdivision? Now I look at it like, it fits there.
Yeah.
And there's going to be somebody really happy to live there.
Absolutely. And that's the thing, having a variety of housing. Same thing. 10 years ago, my kids were looking for a house. And it was just like, you're going to pay what? Well, and that was 10 years ago.
Yeah.
Just going, ow, ouch, what in the world? And of course, mom and dad, can you help? That sort of thing. And we can't afford the house we live in now, because when the dairy farm, my in-laws dairy farm went away, we kept an acre, tore down the old farmhouse when we moved back from DC that my wife grew up in, and built our house there. And yeah, an acre of ground in Meridian now. It's fantastic. So when it's Bridge Tower subdivision, the old Bridge Tower now, came in, we talked to the developer, and okay, it was a 3-to-1 behind our 1 acre. Okay, 2 and 2/3 maybe, but it is what it is. There's not going to be a 1-to-1. I can't afford it unless we want to change the look and feel of our communities to something different, maybe to like our neighbor to the north. And we've always been the middle child, if you will, between what that is to the north and maybe to the south. And I think it's a sweet spot, because we do try to have things that are affordable for everybody. And that's the thing I think too, I'm going to preach a little bit. Affordable housing is not low income housing anymore. It's not. And that's something, when we put in the affordable housing project over here off of Eustic Road and near Linder, I mean, it's for working folks. It's people who have jobs. It's people who are just retired and living on their pension and Social Security. And the housing market has just gone so crazy that it's not Section 8 housing. And I'm not deriding that, but our community is such that we want to have things for our kids to be able to live in, for grandparents to come back and live near their children and grandchildren, and having that variety. So that's the challenge too, is how do you make that look just like your project was tonight? Does it fit? Does it flow? Does it, transition well? And those are, like I said, there's no right or wrong answer. It's just that feel that, okay, is this workable? And is this the best thing for our community? So you're getting a good taste of it tonight. So from projects already. So which is good. So other questions? So I think Caleb, you're going to be up next.
Okay. Thank you, Councilman Hogan. Really appreciate the letting us question you and the insight for sure. So thank you.
Mr. Chair, Commissioners, before I jump back into the PowerPoint and my slides, I will apologize to Mr. Hoagland and the great state of Minnesota for claiming him as our own. I guess I remember hearing some of the stories about him growing up and raising his family here, and I've extrapolated that to be a native, when we're in Norm's bar having a drink and he's telling me these stories about, no. Anyway, so I do apologize for that, but thanks for setting the record straight and your service to our community and being here this evening. I do appreciate you, Brad. Thank you. And then also, and he did a better job than I will, but I will also just thank you for your service. We don't make light, and we do remember quite frequently, you don't get chocolates, you get a big whopping dollar paycheck every month or $0 paycheck every month. So what you do is commendable, and just appreciate your heart for this community as well. So with that being said, I do have a couple of slides. It's actually more than a couple, it's a handful. I'm going to run through them pretty rapidly at this point. I'll ask you to look and read more of the slide than listen to me. I'm going to put a finer point on maybe some of the bullet points that are there. I'll try to linger for a little bit on each slide, but I'm not going to read them to you. So this one, I think I do just appreciate the first two in this one. I appreciate your interest in land use planning in our community. And again, I'll reiterate this. I think everyone's at just time to dedicate, not only just on Thursday nights, but even in preparation for Thursday nights, and taking some time to read and understand and begin to formulate some thoughts about each project that's on your agenda. So there's other things, but I think that is the top two on this to me are right at the very top of being a successful commissioner. Knowledge, again, I don't plan on reading too much of this, but just an overall knowledge understanding at least. You don't need to be planning staff. You don't need to be a certified planner. Some of the stuff you'll wish you didn't know, but you will pick it up over time. We don't ask you to memorize the code. We'll write down the applicable parts of the code and the comprehensive plan and state code and all that. So, but again, you'll pick up on some of this stuff, but do some of that research on your own too. Even some of the things with Robert's rules and how we operate, again, it's second nature to some, and you'll pick it up. So just that willingness, I think, is great. Listening, and again, I don't see any of this, but even some of the this didn't come up, but I know in the past we've had some that'll be on their phone, and you can tell. I mean, you can try to be, and it's not a, hey, this meeting's running late, quick text. It's more of a, I'm sitting back, slouching, not listening to people talk, and I'm disinterested really in that. So just, make eye contact, appear at least that you're engaged, if not fully being listening. And so those nonverbal cues, I guess, on this one. So there's some more of those things about slouching and whatnot. Yeah, this one, again, I'll just really let you read this one. And this one, I think what I'll maybe point out as you're reading, and again, please read more than listen to me. Sometimes I feel like past commissions have all wanted to get to yes. And we want that too, whether it's a yes to deny or a yes to approve. It is okay to disagree. Do that respectfully, please. And again, there's not an issue, but just make sure. And sometimes it seems like it can drag on trying to persuade respectfully, trying to persuade each other the other way. Split votes are fine, honestly. I mean, if you can get there and consensus, I think is great. You don't have to be. Please just remain respectful, courteous amongst yourselves. We're watching as well. So, but again, you don't necessarily have to all agree before a motion's made, or if you really don't believe in the project, and again, this has happened before, it doesn't have to be 100% of you voting in favor or against the project. So, again, I think we've talked about some of these already. I'll say it just one more time, I think. Prepare. And I think Councilman Hoagland, Brad, sorry. We are available as staff. So you're reading the report, it doesn't make sense to you, you don't understand it, call us, email us, whatever. We are available. You can't talk to pretty much anyone else, but city staff, you can reach out to us. So please do if you have any questions. Ahead of time's great. During the meeting's fine too, but we can have a little bit more frank and conversation if you talk to us just one-on-one. that isn't an ex parte communication. So just so you're not confused on that. I won't mess on with this one too much. Kurt covered a lot of the when the agenda has to be published and that type of a thing. We'll take care of the minutes. We talked about summary minutes. We do verbatim. Roll the chair. I won't get into that either, but it's there. It sounds like Commissioner Seal will be chairman again for this next year. But if you are, next year wanting to serve, we'll help you with some of that too. There's a cheat sheet that's put together that's handed down now over time, kind of at the beginning where you explain to everybody how the meeting is going to work and things like that. But we can prep you a little bit more if you're.
Are the remarks that we make okay at the beginning to explain the public hearing process?
Yes, they've cleared legal, and I think,
Okay.
and to me too, I think it does help.
I'm copying his, so.
I think it helps the public too. I really do. I know sometimes for me, it's almost, I've heard it before, so I'm not actively listening, but when I do listen to the words that are coming out, I really do think it helps people in the audience understand what's about to happen.
Yeah.
So
I appreciate that
Yeah.
you actually say the public, I don't know if it's required or not, but to be able to explain that, because all the people listening in there come to maybe one meeting in their lifetime. And so to be able to explain that is very helpful. And it was challenging because you want to answer that guy's question who kind of went out of turn, but then that's not part of it. So,
Learn you can't.
yeah.
Yeah, the kind of the outline from that came from Ryan and then a little bit earlier, and then Commissioner McCarville took it and really amplified it because she was like, she just really wanted to get that information out there. So, and I've pared it down a little bit, and whoever goes next will do what they want to. So
I reinforce two things. I agree with all that 100%. So two very much related thoughts. So one is I agree with Commissioner Lorcher's comment 100%. For most people, not our applicants necessarily, but for most people, they might come to one of these meetings in a lifetime, maybe twice. It's intimidating. It's foreign. They really don't understand how it works or what the process is. And so I think that's super helpful. And I share your thoughts on that too. I think that's really helpful for just kind of our lay audience members in particular, that this may be their first and only meeting they ever come to, and just to understand what's going on. And other observation that's going to make, and Caleb hit on this like 2 or 3 times now, but I want to compliment the commission as a whole, but Chairman Seal in particular, that it is super intimidating for many people to come to a podium like that. People hate to speak in public, number one, and this is a very formal, kind of intimidating area. And so, to make that person feel comfortable, you have a very nice knack about you of, they feel welcome. And I think the fact, that idea of listening intently and being able to make some kind of connection, eye contact and so forth is super important, because people are, at a minimum, they're probably intimidated, and some of them are probably fearful, and they almost dread coming up to a podium like that. So I think you all do, collectively as a commission, do a great job. And single out Chairman Seal in particular. I think you have a really nice touch about that.
appreciate that.
if I can, maybe in the same vein and using tonight as an example, it hasn't happened for a while. You do have, and Kurt explained it during the hearing, you do have some discretion there. If you want to have, if an applicant is up here, and I'm not saying this happened tonight, but it's new information or they're making accusations against, and you're like, okay, yeah, we need to have other people come up to rebut what they just said. And, they don't just drop the mic necessarily, right? You can do that. What the approach I would just recommend you thinking about, it is your discretion, Chair. You can almost informally poll the rest, you don't have to be the bad guy or the good guy, right? You can say, hey, should we take, so that is your discretion. I will also say though, and I'm sure Mr. Starman would have reminded you of this, the applicant does still get the last word though. They get to come back up if you're going to do that. So you can reopen a closed public hearing, you can have them testify twice, but you're basically just going through this loop, and the applicant should always have the last opportunity to address you before you close the public hearing. And then I'll just say this again, if you have any other clarifying things for staff, we can still talk with a closed public hearing. That just means that the audience is done, right? Again, I know most of you understand all that, but just, so you still have some discretion. You can undo things you've already done, like closing a public hearing. But anyway, so, I think that's that slide.
one thing I'd like to add on to that is one of the things that I try to do, and I didn't do a very good job of it early on, was I try to get things addressed as part of the public hearing process. So I can make statements and, you know, put opinions out there and things like that, like I did tonight, but I don't want to surprise anybody with what, especially the applicant, with what I'm going to say. You know, the question should have been asked. I mean, the idea of how I think about this, whether I support it or not, should be, you know, something that could be inferred fairly easily. So just try and make sure that you get your comments, get your points out during the public hearing portion of it. So that way it's not a big surprise when something else is brought up about it, like, you know, I hate this street, you know, or I don't like the design, or, you know, whatever that is. I mean, those opinions should already be out there.
I will just add again, similar to that comment. This commission, and this has been a long-standing kind of unwritten rule, you'll go down the line and everyone will kind of share their 2 cents during the deliberation process, not in the public hearing like you were just talking about, Mr. Chair, but as you're deliberating. That isn't required. You don't have to, you know, to your point, people should know where you're at. It shouldn't be a surprise, but you don't necessarily have to explain yourself. So it's to each his own and how you're comfortable. This is more for the new commissioners. You know, you'll be asked, but you don't feel like you have to say something with every project. That is, again, kind of the longstanding tradition, but that's not a requirement by any means, so.
Yeah, I would say for tonight, you know, Jared and I kind of took the reins to kind of create an example, but there's plenty of times where either of us might say anything on an application. And once you get more comfortable with it, then you will too. And if you have something to add, you can. If it's already been said, then you don't.
Writing that down, that there's times Jared's not going to say.
I was just gonna say, use her as the example, not me.
I am the example.
I'm a windbag. I'm gonna take your advice and go look back at the minutes and go, oh no. Oh.
All right, so just some thoughts as you're asking questions, maybe prod and thoughtfully inquire. Again, this just maybe gets the blood flowing a little bit better if you're looking to ask some questions. I think we've covered a lot of this. I believe these are just summary slides here. Do participate again, be actively listening. Making motions, again, we talked about this a little bit on Tuesday when we met for orientation. We do set forward at least the start of a motion in, we call them an outline. I like to call them the cheat sheet. So it's there for you. Yeah, I think that if you have any questions,
Very helpful.
I was just gonna say, if you have any feedback on that or questions, we can amend that, but I think we're in a pretty good point where we try to summarize the high points on a page.
I find that extremely helpful. So it's,
Again, the idea with that is not to, instead of reviewing the information and reading public testimony and agency comments and all that stuff, but just as to have in front of you maybe something to take notes on and whatnot, so. Some traps to avoid, again, I'm not gonna read them to you. You know, one of the things that we can do is design it from the dais, right? That's not a best practice. It's usually not very productive. Not to say you can't have some thoughts and whatever, but when we try to design a project, you're gonna have 6, 7 different ideas on how it could be done better potentially. So if you want to direct an applicant to go back to the drawing board and here's some thoughts on when you do that, but on the fly and all that, it usually doesn't go very well. And then this one, I think I'm getting towards the end here. Again, the first one, and follow may even be, but trust the code, the comp plan, and the process, right? Trust your gut. I mean, that was said a couple of times, but really we do try to put forward those things. Yeah, I get it. It's tough when you got neighbors here that, you know, I've been saving my pennies and this is, you know, this is the worst thing that's going to happen in safety and all those things. There has been thought put into these things, and yes, you're here to kind of decide and tweak and make sure it is right in the best interest of our community. But the code and the comp plan, it's not perfect, but that process really does hopefully get things pointed in the right direction. Number 5, a good record. So, and 6. So a good record doesn't necessarily, Dean's taking the minutes. There's YouTube video we can watch. We'll write down the findings and the conclusions, but we really do need your help on, if you're going to add a condition, it should be clear the discussion on why the condition. It wasn't just a random and build a sidewalk over there. It's like, where did that, we didn't talk about that at all. Didn't come up from the public, it's just this. So help us and everyone understand the nexus for your conditions or your action, whatever the case may be. So we'll document that, but if you can help us understand the thought process, that really will help. So. Again, I think this kind of summarizes a lot of the previous slides. Then this is my last one, just a couple of resources. So if you want to, I know you've all been to the website because you look at the packet from the clerk and whatnot. This one, the Idaho chapter of the American Planning Association, they have some good resources there. It's not 100% endorsed by the city, but they have some good stuff there. This planning tools and guidelines book, it's got everything you could ever want to know about takings and ethics and open meetings and ex parte. It's not all just legal stuff, but if you really want to get into case law and things, there's really good tools and guidelines. So you can kind of jump around depending on the topic. I think it's like 700 pages. But the table of contents is really good. And if you're curious about zoning and the history of zoning, you could go and read some of that. So I will endorse it. It's not necessarily a tool that we use as a city, but I think it's very helpful, especially if you want to dig a little deeper into some of these things. There's hyperlinks to court cases that kind of explain some of that. APA's website, there's a bunch of different journals and excerpts on topics, housing, right? Housing's a big topic. Best practices that way too. So anyways, just some websites and resources. The last one, so the 3 kind of towards the bottom there, those are books that are, recommended if you want something to put you to sleep at night. But really pretty good actually about furthering kind of your role in this process. And then the last one is just, we do have, it's small, but the council does typically annually, and this year is included, we do have a small training budget. So if you see something at one of these websites and say, hey, there's a conference coming and it's $200. Can I go to that? Will the city pay for me to go to this? I want to learn more. And it's related, right? It shouldn't be a culinary class. It needs to be related, but housing or economic development or whatever, let me know. And we may be able to send you there. So look for those things. If you just run across those trainings, local trainings especially, maybe even regional, if we can do it, relatively inexpensively. But if you want to learn more, become a better commissioner, I want to support you in that. So I think with that, we'll all stand for questions. Again, thank you, Brad, for being here, Kurt, and the commission for your time this evening.
Yep. Only thing I'll add to that, and you kind of touched on it a couple of times, Caleb, in here, is just don't be afraid to be the voice of dissent or the voice of optimism when everybody else is not looking that way. So every opinion is appreciated for sure. And I can tell you when Ryan was chair, we had a lot of tiebreakers that went down. And it's when I learned the most, to be perfectly honest, just because there was just so many differing opinions on stuff. But at the end of the day, after the vote was held, we were back to being good neighbors. So you can disagree respectfully, make your point and everything. And truly, it is appreciated. So, the idea is that we are all going to think differently. That's why there's 7 of us. So appreciate any and all input as long as it's respectful.
Mr. Chair, I did have one more thing. I know it wasn't part of my presentation, but I did want to, the question you asked, Brad, about a joint meeting. So I have talked to the mayor's chief of staff about that again, and I have over time. This ties in a little bit with maybe if there's an opportunity. We are working on revamping the staff report, and I know you've heard about that because we've been working on it for over a year. off and on. But we are gearing back up, and you and the council are super users of our staff report. So to me, that is a good workshop item to sit and share with you before we start using it and publishing it, and you can play with it and we can explain it to you and even receive feedback. Hey, you know, this section, maybe what about if you moved it down? Maybe council says, nope, we like it where it's at, but you understand that and you all are using it. And so if you're overruled or you all agree, but at least you understand kind of how we got there with that. So just so you know, I'm somewhat lobbying for that. I'm advocating for that anyways. Either way, we'll come to you as a body and them as a body. If we can do that together, I think that's even better, but that's not my call. So
Okay.
I just wanted to let you know we are working on the staff report, and here in the next couple of months even, if not sooner, we'll be back before you and kind of run through that with you again here. So I'm sorry, I had that.
Nope, that's okay, because I had one more thing too. So Caleb and I, we're just gonna go back and forth all night. No, but and I actually wrote it down because I didn't want to forget it about it. And it's a mistake that I made early on. So one thing I'll say is when you are asked about your attendance, if you're going to be able to attend the meeting, please reply to all. So that's helpful for me, just to keep track of it. We're kind of spoiled with our clerk. She treats us very well. Thank you very much. But and the other part of that is if you do have questions of staff, ask staff independently. And if it's something that they think needs to be disseminated, or you would like them to disseminate that information, have them do that so it is on the public record and it becomes part of the record. So I'll definitely give that advice. That's all I
Mr.
got.
Chair, I had
Sir.
one comment thinking about Rhonda, Ms. McCarville. The reason why we developed that outline was that if you recall, some of the commissioners were asking a lot of questions of staff before the applicant could even go and get to their portion of the project. So she felt we were getting off topic and the meetings weren't being very efficient. So I would just ask that you guys keep that in mind and keep that practice going as well, because that is the best practice in my opinion. It works well, because sometimes your questions may get answered by the applicant, or they may be the best person to answer it for you. Even though we are subject matter experts with the comp plan, the code, but maybe they had a different vision or they designed it a certain way because of their thought process. And it's good for you to hear that side as well.
Yep. Appreciate that. Any other questions? I was gonna say, we don't often get to grill all these people, so. Appreciate everybody's time tonight for certain. So thanks again for letting us pick your brain and giving us the information that we have here. Appreciate it. And with that, Commissioner Lorcher.
Mr. Chair, the motion we adjourn.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded that we adjourn. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. We are adjourned.